Well, hey there, freaks. It's your boy Marty Bent here to introduce this week's episode of Tales from the Crypt. I had the great pleasure of sitting down with Alexander Leishman, co-founder of River Financial, a new Bitcoin exchange, Bitcoin-only exchange, to be more specific, that is available here in the States, in 8 states right now. They're looking to expand. But beyond that, Alex and I had an incredible conversation of why he started River, why they moved from Alto to River. River Financial is formerly Alto Financial, for any of you freaks that may be confused out there. Recent rebrand, river.com, great domain name. So Alex and I talked about what it's like being a Bitcoin-only exchange, why they're Bitcoin-only, what that allows them to focus on, what they're thinking about building, and then beyond that, why he's into Bitcoin, and why we think that Bitcoin should be framed as an American value. We should be shaming people who, in America specifically, who don't like Bitcoin, because Bitcoin aligns very well with the ideals that this country was founded on. So to be anti-Bitcoin is to be un-American, I would say, and I believe Alex would agree with me. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. We got deep. We did a little drinking. We had a 6-pack and some whiskey. Went for well over 2 hours. Great conversation. Got cosmic at the end. Alex is a big history buff, so we dove into some historical topics as well as a bunch of other stuff. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. And a good way to ease into the new year. It's not really easing into the new year. We come in pretty strong, I would say. A good punch to the face for this new year. This episode of Tales from the Crypt is brought to you by Cash App. As you freaks know, Cash App is the simplest way to send, save money, and stack sats. And now it's the simplest way to try to grow your money. Introducing Cash App Investing. We've been telling you guys about this for months now. All right, you can now stack slivers of stonks if you so please on the Cash App. I know some of you out there are like, oh, why are we stacking stonks? Why are we stacking stonks? Hey, if you don't want to, you don't have to. The option is there. What do we like here? We like optionality, all right? If you do want to stack stonks for some reason, maybe you just have an affinity for some company and you just want to buy their stock. Maybe it's a little too expensive for you. Now, Cash App lets you own as little as $1 worth of that stock, okay? Because Cash App is directly connected to your bank account. There are no 4 to 5 day waiting periods for inbound transfers, so you can start investing today. Their brokerage services are provided by Cash App Investing, a subsidiary of Square and member SIPC. As always, when you sign up, use the code STACKINGSATS. That's one word, STACKINGSATS. You're going to get $10, and then Cash App is going to be so kind to send $10 to our good friends at Owls Lacrosse. Owls Lacrosse. So download the Cash App from the App Store or Google Play Store today and enjoy this episode with Alex. Had a great time. We had a good time boozing about a week ago. Happy New Year, freaks.
Tales from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? I gotta take a sip. We just cheers. Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here on a Friday, the most confusing Friday of the year after Christmas. Sitting down with somebody I'm very excited to speak with, the founder of River Financial, Alex Leishman. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Marty. Excited to be here.
Alexander Leishman. Do you like Alexander or Alex?
Alex is fine.
Yeah. Well,
my family calls me Alexander, but everyone else calls me Alex.
Yeah.
Too long.
Well, this is the second time we're getting together in person. The first time we met was in Riga, correct?
That's right. In the Baltics.
Yeah, we met in the Baltics. We had to meet over in Latvia. It was a good time. It was me, you, Nick Carter, and I forget, in a circle talking about coin joins or something.
Yeah, I was outside of a food truck. Can't really remember. I think I was drinking a coffee or something. It was a few years ago.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. Well, it's good to be back in person with you.
Yeah, happy to be here.
And a lot is, what were you doing when we met then?
I was working at an investment fund, and I was out in Latvia to, just see if there was any cool Bitcoin investments going on.
So a lot has changed between now and then. Before we get to what you're doing now, let's get into your story. How did you get into Bitcoin? You've been doing this for a while now, it seems.
Yeah, it has been a while. It's been a wild ride, like it has for most of us. I first got into Bitcoin, I think it was 2013 summer, I started playing around with some web programming and using Bitcoin to build a fun project for Bitcoin donations, because I didn't have to get hooked up with Stripe or any real payment providers, and I could just have something that worked right away without asking for permission. But my interest in kind of the ideas behind Bitcoin go back a lot further. Actually, when I was in college as a sophomore, I started reading a lot about Austrian economics. I started reading just about economics in general, and went down the rabbit hole. Eventually ended up reading The Denationalization of Money by Friedrich Hayek. And I was studying aerospace engineering at the time, but got really interested in these economic ideas. And by the time I was a senior in college, I really thought, one day my dream was to build a financial institution outside of the purview of the Federal Reserve, basically offer people money that the government couldn't really control. And
what year were you studying this in college?
Let's see, I graduated college in 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, so Bitcoin had been around at that point, but Bitcoin was launched while I was in college, but I didn't really know about it. I wasn't, I didn't have many friends in computer science. I wasn't really exposed to that. I think one friend had mentioned it once, and didn't really think much about it, didn't look into it.
Not that it matters, but where'd you go to college?
I went to University of Maryland.
Oh, boss.
Yeah, for my undergrad. Yeah, born and raised Maryland. Yeah, so.
Terps, baby.
That's right.
What's the life of an aerospace engineer major like?
Yeah, it was pretty lonely. It was a lot of work, a lot of studying. I think I stressed myself out, but overall, I learned a ton, a lot of math, first principle stuff. I was doing a lot of work on like autonomous systems, dynamics and controls. I worked in a lab there. That was the Collective Dynamics and Controls Laboratory, which is basically how do we get fleets of robots to collectively behave and have certain, and achieve certain goals. So that was pretty cool.
A lot of the Internet of Things like
yeah, kind of. But actually, a lot of these aren't internet connected. I did a lot of underwater robot stuff, so like AUVs, and so actually those are hard to communicate with. So you need to rely on their own autonomy to work, because they can't really communicate easily outside of the water.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you find yourself applying any the principles you learned in that major to the Bitcoin world? I think like this idea of just, I think like the dynamics and modeling systems is just teaching you a way to think in general, which is like taking a simple thing or taking a complex thing and breaking it down into simple parts, and that you can kind of work off of in bite size. So for example, when you're modeling an airplane or something, the first thing you learn is, well, let's assume this is just a dot, right? And there are forces acting on this dot. And how do we model this if that's our model? How do we calculate its behaviors if that's our model? And then you incrementally increase the complexity. And I think with kind of building things around Bitcoin, like just taking those lessons has been really useful, because Bitcoin is an inherently very complex thing. And I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by like how much there is to know. And I think engineering just in general teaches you to acknowledge you're not going to know a lot of stuff, break it down into simple pieces, and try to just like take bite-sized chunks out of it. Yeah, that's something, after my conversation with Dave Collum last week, something I tweeted out was I think a lot of the world's biggest problems stem from the fact that people don't understand complex systems at all, or aren't even aware that systems are complex.
Absolutely. I think my time as an engineer, both in aerospace and moving into software eventually, really hammered that home. I think, in software, the feedback loop is so fast because you build things and you just iterate and iterate, and you realize that, every software engineer has introduced 1 million bugs into software inadvertently by making a simple change that they thought wouldn't be a big deal, and then it broke a bunch of stuff. And that kind of hammers home this idea that nothing is really simple.
Right. And more importantly, it hammers home the idea that maybe these systems can't be micromanaged, or like you're saying, you want to build a financial system out of the purview of the Fed. I imagine it's, I don't want to lead you here, but I imagine it's because you don't believe the Fed centrally controlling a monetary system is advisable.
Absolutely. If you look at what works in economies, it's kind of this emergent behavior from the individual actions of people pursuing their own self-interest.
But I think it's odd that as in the United States, especially just speaking as an American, we value the ideals of free market capitalism and this hands-off approach to an economy, more or less. But then the core of our economic system, the money, is managed by this priesthood, almost kind of like a communist politburo. And I just find the, cognitive dissonance there quite odd in our society, how this is accepted and goes unchallenged, but we kind of as a society also collectively love free market ideas.
Yeah, well, I think we like the idea of free market ideas.
Maybe that's a more apt summary.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like we're living under a free market right now, specifically because of the way the Fed acts, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, for sure. I think, on the spectrum of like a way an economy could function, like if you compare us to, the Soviet Union, we're relatively free market, but, we still have a long ways to go. I totally agree.
No, yeah, it's a sliding scale, right? It's the story of the boiling frog.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of build this worldview into your product at River?
Yeah. So the higher level question behind kind of this whole like money thing is, well, if the Federal Reserve isn't controlling the money supply, who should, right? Or what should it be? And I think the answer that people like me have come to is that we just let the market decide. And so at River, what we're doing is basically kind of the manifestation of this goal I had as an undergrad, and that's to give people access to this new type of money that is neither controlled by the government nor controlled by private institutions either. When I initially, kind of conceived of this idea, I thought that maybe someday the company I started would issue its own money, backed by commodities or something like that. Maybe we have vaults full of, some commodity that backed the currency.
Yeah, you go back to like the 18th or 19th century Canadian banking system, where they had a free banking system.
Yeah.
Backed by hard assets, I believe.
Yeah. And the United States also had, there wasn't a lot of hard assets backing some of the money, but I mean, we had gold-backed monetary system for a long time. And actually, so, I think the long-term goal of River is to basically be this big financial institution that competes with the current ones out there, the JP Morgans, the Bank of Americas, the Goldman Sachs, but an institution that grows up around this new type of money, and that's Bitcoin. And the initial goal here is to give people access to this new type of money, because you can't build a financial institution around money if people aren't using it. And so our goal right now is to build features around building the best Bitcoin on-ramp for people in the United States.
Yeah, and you're just teasing a GIF of how easy it is to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It seems very easy.
Yeah, it is very easy. Once you're signed up, so signing up is pretty smooth. Just there's some KYC information, unfortunately. We can get into that if you want to talk about regulations in the United States. But once you're signed up, you connect your bank account and you can just buy right away. And we make that Bitcoin available to you in a few days, and you're good to go. You can withdraw it, deposit it on chain, Lightning Network, and we're focused on giving everyone the latest Bitcoin functionality.
And on top of that, you're focused on Bitcoin only, which is a very, very principled stance in today's world of crypto, quote unquote. Why Bitcoin only?
Yeah, so over my time in this industry, I spent a lot of time playing around with these other coins when I was first introduced to this stuff back in 2013. I remember that was really the first alt season.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people.
The multi algo altcoins like Vercoin. Yeah, many waves. The proof of stake stuff started with Peercoin, Vericoin.
Yeah, Peercoin. There was Feathercoin,
Aurora Coin,
Namecoin.
Namecoin. People are still talking about Namecoin.
People still talk about Namecoin. So, the BTCE type of altcoins back then.
BTCE, RIP.
Yeah, RIP. Honestly, that was probably one of the most reliable, businesses to have ever existed in this space.
Right. So for you freaks that don't know, BTCE went down like a year ago. Or did it go down in 2017?
Yeah, I think the Feds took it down.
Yeah, so it was a Russian exchange. A lot of people think a lot of the Mt. Gox coins went through there, right?
Yeah, I think that's what really got them is they ended up receiving a lot of those coins, and that was probably a mistake.
Yeah. A lot of people thought 2017 was great, but I remember like back 2013, 2014, that alt season was it was a funnier one because it was more underground. Right?
Crypt was the up and coming exchange.
Big Vern.
That was the first exchange to list like all the alts, and then it was a total cash out scam. The guy just disappeared with everyone's money.
Yeah. So you had exchange Big Vern. He was a dude from Florida. We don't know where he is now. Did he go to jail?
I don't think he ever got in trouble.
No, he never got in trouble.
As far as I know, maybe he did, but I think I had only had like, a few bucks on there when he finally shut it, ran off with everything, so I wasn't too upset.
Yeah, Big Vern ran off. I actually never like got, I don't think I was ever on Crypt. I was just like following on crypto Twitter. I was a lurker back in the day.
Yeah.
Just like following people on crypto Twitter talking about like trading on that shit. But you had that, and then you also had like the altcoin creators just completely exit scamming.
Oh yeah,
My favorite, I forget what coin it was, with the dude. It was like, like the day he was supposed to launch it, he just took a picture of himself in a robe and like a penthouse suite, like took all your Bitcoin bitches, like.
And then there was
thanks.
And then there was also that guy who ran Neo and B. It was this like he raised a bunch of money to start this Bitcoin store or something. People sent him a bunch of Bitcoin, and he just like ran off with it.
Yeah, this is don't give people your Bitcoin.
So, what's funny here is, kind of having gone through that, seeing all that happen. After I started kind of really wrapping my head around Bitcoin and really. Which took me quite a while, as most people, I think, and realizing that all this other stuff was more or less noise. I kind of was just heads down for a few years, mostly just focus on Bitcoin stuff. And then 2017 came along, and I looked up. I had just kind of shut everything else out. I looked up, and I realized all this stuff had happened that I had totally, like, just not paid any attention to. There was this whole YouTube crypto scene that just totally took me by surprise, and all these people all of a sudden who knew I worked on Bitcoin for quite a while at that point were asking me about these random things like
Juan Chain,
or
IOTA,
Gollum or IOTA, or all these tokens and Ethereum tokens, and I was like, what? Or like, why are all these people asking me about this? And I started looking at the prices of these things and the market caps, and I was realizing things are getting like crazy here. This is out of control. So anyways, but at that point I had been through one of those things already, right? I had been the noob. I had, tried to buy back when I was younger, just buy the new coin that just came out and see if I could get it to pump, and then, sell it on some, sketch exchange. So I saw, but the magnitude of the 2017 thing was totally different.
Oh my gosh. It was insanity, man.
It was insanity. And so anyways, I mean, long story short here is, at the end of the day, after all of my time in this space, I've come to the conclusion that, and my co-founder Andrew Benson kind of says this in a very well summarized way, which is Bitcoin is kind of a technical revolution. There is really a lot of cool technical elements about Bitcoin, but it's really more of a monetary revolution. There's no new cryptography in Bitcoin. It pieces together hash functions, public key cryptography, and creates this cool economic incentive structure around it all to get the world to agree on a ledger. Really, this is a monetary revolution, and I think that in this sort of revolution, it's mostly winner takes all. I don't think there's going to be this plethora of cryptocurrencies that get, are friendly and get along with each other, it doesn't really make sense.
No, and the market has proven that, like we
Totally.
said, like many times throughout the last decade, the last 11 years.
And even throughout history, right? The only reason that we have so many national currencies is because nation states have borders and governments to enforce those things. But the world's money was gold and has been gold more or less for thousands of years, for most of history, other than government mandated alternative forms of money or money in places where they didn't really have, access to gold.
Nobody realizes it feels.
Yeah. I mean, silver was a second, right? Silver was a second place. I think that...
No, I mean just that, like, people don't realize, like gold was the money and that it's not anymore.
Well, it's funny, actually. Funny story here just happened a few days ago. I was at a Christmas event with some extended family members, and someone from my extended family said, well, how does Bitcoin get its value? Obviously, this is a question that a lot of people in Bitcoin have been asked, pretty much everyone from people who want to learn more about it. And I started to describe, well, it's scarce, it's easily transferable, it's durable. There's a lot of people who want something like this. She goes, and then I said, well, how does the US dollar get value? And she said, well, it's backed by gold. And I said, no, it's not. She goes, wait, what? Then what's it backed by? And I said, exactly. And anyways, I think it just hammers home. I think a lot of people, I think most people know that gold has always been money, but they still think it is.
Right.
They still think that their dollar is gold. A lot of people still do.
No, this is a story I've told many times on the podcast. Like 8 out of 10 people I asked are like, yeah, it's backed by gold.
Yeah.
People still think the US dollar is backed by gold.
Yeah. So I mean, some people like to call Bitcoin or money in general this whole like collective delusion. They've read *Sapiens* or something like that. But really, I think the weirdest thing about...
It's not a collective delusion.
No, it's not. The weirdest thing, though, that is a collective delusion is that the dollar is backed by gold, which is literally
a delusion,
a collective delusion. And so it's kind of funny. Anyways.
No, do we have to shake people? I don't have to go physically shake people, but sometimes it feels like you have to.
Well, I think that if there's...
I'm not advising anybody to go physically shake people.
I think that there's an interesting... I mean, this is just giving me ideas, right? For maybe we'll have a marketing campaign. The dollar isn't backed by gold. I think if I was a billionaire, I'd be buying billboards in New York, San Francisco, in the big cities in the United States, and said, the dollar isn't backed by gold.
It isn't. People are like, what?
Be like, what? I'd be like, have a website, have like a link to some website explaining it. I just link to like the Federal Reserve. They probably have a page that it's not backed by gold anymore.
Link to like the what the fuck happened in 1971.
Yeah.
Right? WTF happened.
Is that a real website?
Oh yeah, you haven't seen it yet?
No,
it's incredible. Shout out to Ben. Shout out to Ben. I forget your Twitter handle right now. Ben Prentice. Mr. Cool B. Shout out to Mr. Cool B. WTF. And
so if there's any billionaires listening who want something fun to do, maybe put up some billboards.
What the fuck happened in WTF happened in 1971. That's the website. Him and Insane Clown Car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great project.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Another cool thing that would be, has anyone made a U.S. debt counter but denominated in Bitcoin?
I don't think anybody's made an official counter, but I have seen somebody quote the U.S. national debt in Bitcoin terms recently. It was absurd. It was like multiples of.
Yeah, more than 21 million for sure.
Yeah, many multiples.
Yeah, many multiples. Yeah.
It was insane. Like 100, I believe, way above 100 million.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's insane. It's getting precarious too. Like we're seeing capital controls that Matt and I were just talking about on Rabbit Hole Recap earlier today. Like, did you see the lines outside the German gold dealers this week?
I did.
They're about to reduce the amount of gold which you can buy at an anonymous level by 80% from 10,000 euro to 2,000 euro.
Yeah, I saw that, and I think what a lot of people don't know is that Franklin Roosevelt confiscated owning any real amount of gold when he was president with his Executive Act 6102. And this has happened in the United States, not just way beyond this, way beyond just blocking purchases of gold. It was literal confiscation of any amount of gold over token amounts for rings and jewelry and things like that. And a lot of smart people were able to avoid that because they knew how to get around the system. But I actually grew up with my grandma, who was not a fan of Franklin Roosevelt, telling me that Franklin Roosevelt actually confiscated my great-grandfather's gold, her father. And so we actually have a poster of Executive Act 6102 in the River office on the walls so that people don't forget.
Well, that's another thing, man, we're talking about. This has happened before in history, and they're setting...
Absolutely.
You have to look at again, going back to frogs boiling in water, you have to look at the small incremental steps that go towards the extreme events like Executive Order 6102, and this move in Germany is one of them. Why do they want to KYC at lower levels? Just so they have a registry of people that own gold, and they can go knock on their doors and get the gold from them at some point
Sounds
in the future.
Familiar.
Right?
Yeah. When have they done that in Germany before?
Yeah. But it's not only in Germany. Let's not pick on Germany. It's happening everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Argentina.
No, definitely. I mean, you see it in Argentina. You see it in at the end of the day, every government paper money collapses at some point. It's never... The U.S. dollar is one of the longest lived paper currencies, I think, to have ever existed. There are probably some longer ones, but I can't think of many.
Yeah, this people will contend this, but the average life expectancy of a fiat currency is 27 years. U.S. dollar.
Yeah,
it's been disconnected from gold since 1971, so it's at least almost 50 years now.
Now there is actually an interesting counter argument here, or there are interesting arguments that I've heard, which is, and I'm not saying I agree, but it's that money doesn't matter that much because assets at the end of the day are what really matter, and money is just money just keeps the pipes of the economy flowing. I think it's an interesting thought experiment to think, what would happen if the U.S. dollar? I actually don't agree with this, but I think it's an interesting point to consider. Is at the end of the day, if tomorrow all of our dollars became worthless, we would still own our houses, we'd still own our cars, we'd still own the goods that we own, but our cash would be totally worthless, which is terrible. But most of the economy isn't cash. However, who's going to be hurt the most, right? It's going to be anyone who's saved in cash. All these, anyone who's saved for their retirement. All these companies with stockpiles of cash. And, people are completely vulnerable to this right now. They'll have to sell off their assets to continue operating.
Well, that's it. Well, do they really even own those assets? So we found this out in 2008. After the banks fucked up the economy, they confiscated everybody's assets, all their houses.
Yep.
Who really owns those houses,
right?
And those assets, and
physical goods at the end of the day are, you can only might makes right with that stuff.
Yeah, that's true. But you can have with cars, you can have the dealership come after you with an impoundment service or something like that. What do you really own at the end of the day?
Yeah. And Bitcoin kind of solves it, right? Because with Bitcoin, at least it's easier to hide. It's easier to keep secret from society, what you own. But even then, if the government comes after you and knows you have some amount of Bitcoin, let's be honest, most people are going to give it to them because they have a lot more to lose than their Bitcoin. So, I think there's this interesting kind of
I hate to say that. Is there a need for civil disobedience these days when it comes to that shit?
Well, I do think that civil disobedience is powerful, but I do think that it's important. So I think it's important to be realistic though, because about, society and what most people are going to do, right? If you have, and this actually gets into kind of my own philosophy about the importance of Bitcoin. But I think at the end of the day, I think Bitcoin helps a lot, but I don't think it's a cure for problems with the government, right? Problems with a corrupt government, for example. Like I don't think Bitcoin is going to solve, a developing country's corrupt government, right? And so, it can just help, and it helps create a more stable system. So like my whole Bitcoin like hypothesis is that Bitcoin doesn't fundamentally completely solve like any societal problem in its entirety, but it leads to the development of a financial system that makes it a lot easier for people to opt out of, which is like a check on how much it can get away with. That's my philosophy behind it all.
I'd say I tend to align pretty closely with that too.
Yeah.
Like it's just a better option, right? At the
Right.
end of the day, there will be services that build on top of Bitcoin that act in shitty ways, but again, the nature to opt in or out, to use your voice to exit the system is always there, and the incentives, again, this is a more monetary social phenomenon than a tech phenomenon. The incentives that the tech enables allow you to exit easily, which is better than the system that we live in now, where you're sort of forced to be surveilled and have your purchasing power eroded over time.
Absolutely. And I think it was Nick Szabo who had a really great tweet about this, which I always remembered, which was, if the door in is bigger than the door out, be very, very cautious. Like, be scared.
That's a great quote.
Right. And I think actually Arthur Hayes may have said something similar when he was talking about trading. When you're getting into a position, you need to know how you're going to get out of it, right? If you're a trader. And so that's kind of one of the philosophies that kind of I live by. And it's also what I try to, one of the things that I'm hoping to maintain at River, which is like, I want to create this financial institution where people can trust us if they want to, if they choose to, right? But they can get out real easy. And I think it's like important to maintain that. That's what I think is Bitcoin really brings to the table, is that dynamic.
Yeah. And how do you think it's doing so far?
Bitcoin?
Yeah, Bitcoin, if you had to gauge expectations in 2013 against where we are today, surpassed,
I think
come up a bit short.
I think the recognition of Bitcoin has totally surpassed my expectations for it. I don't know about you. The attention it's gotten over the last 5 years is beyond what I would have imagined. In terms of what the industry looks like, I think we're far behind, and there's a lot of improvement left. I think it's tough, right? And this comes back to like this whole civil disobedience thing and this law thing. One of the biggest threats to economic freedom in the United States, I do feel like, is this surveillance state that the Bank Secrecy Act created back in the 70s, which every financial institution is forced to abide by. We are too, unfortunately. It's the law. Now the question is, what does abiding by it mean? Like, what does the law mean? And it's a complicated thing. Do I believe that people should inherently be allowed to buy Bitcoin without anyone knowing about it? Like, absolutely. Would I love to be able to provide that service as a company? Absolutely. But, the laws exist, and we need to abide by them as a regulated institution. And but I think it's on us as a company, and it's on all of us as I'm speaking to Americans here, but this applies to Europeans as well, and pretty much anyone in any country at this point, to push their legislators and push for a system that, isn't this massive surveillance dragnet that is responsible for our money. Because money, I think at the end of the day, is how we express our desires. How we move our money is how we express our desires. And if that's all can be seen by the government, I mean, that's pretty scary.
No, it's frightening. Not just scary, it's frightening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we have it, again, and harp on this a lot too, we have a decision to make. We can go one of two directions. the Chinese surveillance state exported to the rest of the world, or we break free. And it's not going to be easy to break free. It's hard work.
Absolutely.
How hard is the work? You're on the front lines.
Yeah, I mean, here's the. It's a very complicated dynamic here, because there's a lot going on. On one hand, you have these big incumbent financial institutions who, from my time in the industry so far, going to these compliance events, things like this, I'm kind of the weird guy who will ask, like, has anyone tried to repeal the Bank Secrecy Act? And everyone just kind of like laughs, right? Because what a hilarious question. Why would anyone bother asking that? But that, like, I do that on purpose because I know people will laugh, but I know they've never heard anyone ask that question either. And I want them to have heard someone ask, right? I want to like just plant that idea, like, like, this is a democracy. We can change these things if we want. I think that there's a bit of Stockholm syndrome. I think that a lot of these financial institutions and the people in them have been in this for so long that they don't consider what an alternative world would look like without this massive, regulatory system, this massive surveillance system that they have, this whole, department at a company like Bank of America or JP Morgan or all these companies dedicated to appeasing, right?
That, and then we have example after example after example of hypocrisy of the people who are writing these laws and the banks that are supposed to be following them just completely breaking the rules, like HSBC creating specifically designed teller windows so that Mexican drug dealers could push their briefcase full of unmarked bills through and launder money. The KYC, the anti-money laundering was overtly routed around by the bank itself. Like,
absolutely.
To think that like these systems put in place to protect you from money laundering, terrorists, drug dealers, pedos, it doesn't fucking work. It works against you.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to this saying that actually, funny enough, I saw in a meme once, but it actually has always stuck with me, which is the petty thief goes to prison, but the big thief becomes a feudal lord.
Right?
And I think that's just some like rule of society is generally that's what we end up seeing. And really the dynamic that's been created here is that these big companies, one, they can afford to break the rules, right? They have all the money. They have these government granted monopolies, basically. It's an oligopoly. A bank charter is effectively a license to print money, and at least, for the bigger guys. And getting one is incredibly hard if you're not part of the club. And we've seen this actually with Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley companies basically have been unable to get bank charters. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. But I think part of the reason is that these big guys don't want them to, because they kind of know what that means for them. And also, this whole compliance system is great for them, because the more expensive that they can make it to compete, the fewer competitors they'll have, right? Bank of America can afford to have $100 million a year in compliance costs. A company like mine, who has a moderate amount of venture capital funding, who's lucky enough to have that, which is rare in itself. I mean, in the Valley, it's not rare in Silicon Valley, but in the United States, if I'm just a guy trying to start a business that's just completely, and I don't have millions of dollars of money from investors, I can't hire a chief compliance officer. I can't pay a lawyer $25,000 to write an opinion letter about what I'm doing. And that's basically what this requires. And to these big guys, these costs are nothing, right? But to anyone who's a small competitor, it's you cannot operate unless you have millions of dollars in financing.
This is the free market at work, freaks.
Exactly. It's crazy.
But people put up with it, man. People
put up with it because I think it's kind of Stockholm syndrome. I think that's a lot of it.
I really like that framing.
I think that, if the founding fathers came today and saw what this looks like, they'd be pissed. I think the dialogue needs to change. I think the narrative needs to be flipped on this surveillance state. And I think like Snowden kind of kicked that off, but I don't think it's really continued to gain momentum, unfortunately. I think like when it comes to messages people send to each other, they get that because I think people can understand. I think the mass, public can understand why privacy for your text messages or your emails is important, because everyone sent a message that they would be horrified if they knew like everyone could see, right? People can understand that. When it comes to financial things, I don't think people are as weirdly, I don't think people are as sensitive about that because they grew up in this world where they just assumed everyone, the government and the banks could see all of their transactions. And I think the biggest piece of evidence here is the Venmo app. I don't know if you've tried Venmo. You open that thing and you start using it and you're like, why am I seeing all of my friends' transactions to other people?
You've seen people pay rent.
The default setting on Venmo is public. The default setting on Venmo is to the most popular, from what I can tell, social payments app in the United States is to publicly broadcast.
That's false. It's Cash App.
Is it Cash App?
Disclaimer. They're sponsored.
Well, that's good news. That's very good news.
I think they're beating Venmo now.
That's awesome.
Well, they're number one finance or app in the finance section.
That's great. Because Cash App doesn't do that.
Disclaimer. Cash App doesn't do that for that reason.
Yeah.
Sponsor. Disclaimer.
That's great news. But so anyways, that's enough of my rant about this.
No, keep ranting.
Okay, sure, I can. Well, so what I think is that the narrative needs to be flipped here, and we need to push back against these rules and say, I don't think it's just enough to say like it's bad for privacy. I don't think that's enough. It needs a stronger narrative, and I think it needs to be that it's anti-American. I think it needs to be that it's basically like we just need to label this as it's basically like communism.
Right.
If you look at this,
Really
what
is.
would a communist? What would the communist Politburo? What would the communist government in China, the Soviet Union want? They would want full control over the financial system to see everyone's transactions. That's what we have in the United States, the land of the free. And I think we need to figure out like how did it get this way, and who was behind this, and why did this happen? And unfortunately, until some big names help push something like this, we're not going to see any progress.
What big names are you thinking?
I don't know. I mean, I think if there's any hope, it's weirdly, maybe what's going to be interesting here is to see how Silicon Valley decides, and not that it's one monolithic thing, but I think there's a set of shared values in Silicon Valley that privacy is important, even though it doesn't always manifest itself in the products. I do think that, but if that value is anywhere, I know this sounds really weird, but
It's sounding weird.
It sounds weird, but here's the thing, right?
In the land of Facebook.
But here's the thing: the land of Facebook is also the land of cryptographers, right? It's also the land of privacy advocates. It's also the land of the EFF. So it's like you get the best and the worst.
Right.
But what's going to be interesting here is, does Silicon Valley try to just go around the financial system by helping promote something like Bitcoin? Or, maybe Libra's doing this. Although I think, I don't know.
It's never going to launch.
Huh?
I don't think it's ever going to launch.
I would be surprised if it launches as well. But, or are they going to like just really play ball and try to get that bank charter, right? Or try to join the big boys in New York and be part of the club. And I think that's what we're going to see here in the next few years is the answer to that question.
What are you leaning towards?
I think some people are definitely going to try to play ball, and some people are going to try to go I think even though it sounds really weird, I do think Facebook is actually not playing ball here, and they are trying to do an alternative, although I disagree that alternative is that great. But I do have to give them props for trying something that is clearly pissing off the government, right? Because you can't argue that they're not pissing off. They are. And now I do think, though, what Square is doing behind Bitcoin is very fascinating to see, and I'm very happy to see such a big company help support something like Bitcoin. Square, however, they're going to be, it's tough, right? Because their main businesses dollars. They're connected to the dollar system, and is Bitcoin are they gonna be able to get Bitcoin to be this thing that can, help replace themselves?
Well, yes, I'm very encouraged. Again, disclaimer, sponsor. Very encouraged as well, and I'm hopeful. And I guess it's a good segue into, again, Bitcoin focus. Like, do you think it's imperative to be Bitcoin focused because of the opportunity cost of focusing on other projects? Is it that dire of a situation where you need hyper focus on Bitcoin to help it fortify itself against outside attacks?
Yeah, and sorry for not answering the original question. I think we digressed here, but basically, yeah, back to the, why are we Bitcoin only, right? And what's the importance of that? I do think that if there is going to be a money separate from something that the government prints, it is going to be Bitcoin. And my hypothesis is, as a company, if we're going to help take this, help take the financial infrastructure around Bitcoin to the next level, we have to focus exclusively on that. And there's just the principle of it. There's the philosophical reason and the economic reason. I believe Bitcoin is going to be the winner. But even if you believe that there are going to be multiple winners, it's still kind of rational, especially for a smaller company, to do what we're doing. Because as an engineer, I'm just trying to reason about the amount of work we've had to do right now to support Bitcoin as well as we do already, which is, native SegWit. We built our own wallet from scratch so that we can do all this cool multi-sig stuff later, and it's super flexible, and we support Lightning deposits and withdrawals, and our goal is to have the absolute best, custodial Bitcoin infrastructure that can hopefully someday enable a bunch of non-custodial use cases as well. If we had to do that also for other coins, that wouldn't just double the engineering work, because doing it for Bitcoin is probably the easiest out of any of them, because we have all these great standards. We have all this incredible work that's been done over the years, building libraries and making sure these things interact well. Like I talked about in my Twitter thread about partially signed Bitcoin transactions, right? We have these standards that just enable all of our infrastructure to work well together. I can't even imagine having to do something like that for Ethereum, and then maybe EO. It's just the amount of work and the complexity of our infrastructure wouldn't just double, it would quadruple or 10x, and it'd become a mess.
Yeah, well, and let's focus on Ethereum now. I'm going to pick on Ethereum because of the fact that they're doing 2 hard forks in 3 weeks. If somebody runs a company, they're going to do a hard fork on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
For their difficulty bomb. What would that be like for you if you had to take on that, if you were offering Ethereum services and had to take on that burden?
Yeah, and this comes back to our discussion about complexity, right? It's like, oh, well, it's just a simple upgrade. Nothing's going to go wrong. You just need to be around for an hour to switch it over. It's like, well, one, that's annoying. One, that I have to do that at all on New Year's Day and I can't pick my timeline for it. But two, I'm like, what? Anyone who's ever run a production system knows that even just a minor update can cause catastrophic problems, and you need to be prepared for that. And it's just very strange that there's such lax attitude towards kind of forcing upgrades on people.
Hard forks specifically, because hard forks are not backwards compatible. And imagine they have complacent users who forget to upgrade because it's fucking New Year's Day.
Here's the harsh reality though about a lot of these companies is, I'd like to actually know the number of companies that have to worry about upgrading, because if I had to guess, it's very few, because most of them are using these Ethereum. Well, there's Infura. There's also Alchemy now. I think Coinbase just tweeted they invested in Alchemy recently, which is basically this managed blockchain service. Because it's such a pain in the ass to keep your Ethereum nodes running, people are just outsourcing it to other companies. And, it's the free market at work. And so what we're seeing is, it's not hard to run a Bitcoin node. People have run Bitcoin nodes and haven't upgraded it for years now, and they're fine. But running an Ethereum node is, we're seeing companies like Alchemy and like others raise, 8-figure sums providing businesses to run nodes for companies. It's mind-boggling to me. It's crazy. And so like companies are paying
The plot has been lost.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts. So so that's what ends up happening, right? If I'm a company and I'm building a service on Ethereum, I end up just outsourcing it because I don't want to deal with it. But then at that point,
why are you even fucking here?
I mean, what have I gained? None of my end users can run those nodes, or they can if they're very technical and want to deal with it. But
It's a trusted fourth party. They have to trust you and Amazon.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's like not just Amazon. Yeah, exactly. It's a fourth party. Like actually, we're not. My company actually, River, we're self-hosted.
Yeah. I'm just saying in that example.
No, but in this example, totally.
Yeah.
But that's another like interesting aspect of this whole blockchain thing is you'll find that almost all these companies are running on AWS or Google Cloud, and we made a decision early on that none of our critical infrastructure would run in any cloud because we had to ask ourselves this question: can we make a very short list that's completely complete of who can access our servers, right? We can, as a company, we have a very short list of anyone who could possibly access our servers. If we were running on AWS or Google couldn't even give me that list. AWS couldn't give me that list. And so if we're building a Bitcoin company, how can we seriously operate by running on computers that theoretically hundreds or thousands of people that we have no control over could access?
Why do I have the feeling that's the norm, though?
It's totally the norm because, I mean, to be fair, it is a huge pain in the ass to run your own servers for a production system. Our servers are, high quality servers sitting in a 2,000-pound vault in a secure cage in a secure data center, right? We're take security to the max. It's expensive to do it right. And the reality is, unless you have the resources to do that, you're not going to be as secure realistically or as reliable as AWS and Google. And so if you're making like a social media app or something, it makes no sense to self-host, probably, unless you really care about this and you're willing to dedicate the resources. But if you're building a financial institution based on cryptographic material, like you need to be prepared to do that the right way. And that was our theory is like, if we don't do it now, like we're never going to do it because once you're in the cloud, getting out is incredibly difficult. And, we just wanted to do this the right way.
Are you guys happy that you did
Very happy so far. It's been a bit of a pain. I mean, there's problems we've had that we wouldn't have had in the cloud, but we have good people. And we also just have the engineering mindset at the company to run our own stuff. And I think there's a interesting culture it also builds when you're running your own servers and you're not just a cloud company, because you become a real engineering company at that point. You have your own machines, you're doing your own stuff, and it feels more real.
Right, and going back to like flipping the narrative on we're talking about flipping the narrative on KYC AML, but flipping the narrative on this, it's actually funny. We're talking about AWS. Have you seen their commercials, like running them during football games of like all the companies that are running?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
It was like a Super Bowl ad, right?
Yeah,
They were like, they just list Netflix, Airbnb, blah, 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 blah. And for those companies, I mean, there's no way they're ever getting off.
But that's like ingrained in the narrative, right? It's like, how do we flip that narrative? Like, you should be self-hosting.
That's a good question. And I don't know the answer. And I think my experience with this as a company is it's still very difficult to self-host. The answer might be a disruptive competitor that provides the space and makes it really easy for you to get your own servers and install them and just removes a lot of the friction for it. I mean, for example, we had to find our own vendors, go through these sales processes to get these servers, get them tested and all this stuff. It's a lot of work. It's not like a one-click, buy my server, set it up kind of thing. And I mean, the answer might actually just be like a company making it easier for people to do it. And yeah,
It's just got to become more of a trend.
yeah, it's just got to be a trend. And I think it will flip back somewhat in that I think that there will be a subset of companies that realize that it's a mistake to go completely cloud only. One, because it's like in many ways less secure. In some ways it's more secure because you have this whole security apparatus of AWS protecting your servers instead of your own, maybe one guy, if that, right? But I think we're going to see in the next few years more attacks from like potential insiders at these companies. We already saw kind of one from AWS with Capital One, I think a few months ago.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see potentially more. There might be some like watershed thing that happens, right? That will make people go, wait, maybe this isn't a good idea.
You can hope, but then you like see things like Equifax and all that shit, and it just comes and goes, and nobody gives a fuck.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't think it's going to dramatically get better anytime soon, frankly. But I do think that hopefully we'll see a transition to some more hybrid stuff where some of these like cloud only companies, and I think I've seen rumblings of this happening in the cryptocurrency space at large, is a more hybrid thing where people have some of their own servers and they outsource some of the stuff that needs to like be more elastic to the cloud, right? So for us, even like we use some cloud services, but no core user data is on there. None of our core applications are running there. You know, our internet requests are proxied through G-Cloud because they, you know, have some good DDoS protection. But we're not tied. Like if G-Cloud went down tomorrow, our company would still operate, right? We'd still be good. We'd lose a few little kind of tools here and there that we host on G-Cloud, but you know,
Not a deal breaker.
exactly.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, man. Are you interested in anything like Urbit? Does that interest you at all?
I don't know much about Urbit.
Yeah. All right. Post cut accidentally. Had to cut something out there.
Yeah.
But for good reason, right?
Good reason.
We're talking about meetups here.
Yeah.
BitDev Socratic meetups. You started one in San Francisco.
Yes.
Accidentally mentioned somebody who was at one, and these Socratic meetups are big on privacy. So we're not trying to dox people that are attending these meetups.
Yeah. I accidentally let something slip. Didn't want to make sure that everyone's privacy was protected. Although I think, you know, they wouldn't have cared much, but I like to stick by my own rule. Yeah. So I didn't start the original Bitcoin meetup in San Francisco. I more tagged along about a year and a half ago to help bring this BitDev style meetup that is in New York to San Francisco, and it's been pretty big success, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we were spoiled here in New York, but you guys get like Greg Maxwell and Peter Willis showing up. And
There's
Andrew Chow.
There's a lot of talent in San Francisco. Yeah, we're really lucky to have so many very knowledgeable people.
So, what was the most recent Socratic meetup like? What'd you guys talk about?
So the most recent one, we talked about some mining news, a lot of Bitcoin pull requests, things like that. The biggest thing that's been happening in Bitcoin, obviously, has been this Bit Taproot stuff. And Peter's been doing a lot of work on Bit Taproot. There's been this whole effort to have this big review process. I think it was around 8 weeks.
Yeah, it started by Andrew Towns November 1st.
Yeah, it was. So it's basically like a 2-month process where hundreds of people from around the world basically created these sort of subcommittees or subgroups to review BIP Taproot, try to build stuff on it, and just probe it, basically. And it uncovered a few very important things, actually. One of the things it uncovered was this whole BEC32 malleability issue and the fact that it potentially has some implications on BIP Taproot, and there needs to be some modifications there. Long story short, the BEC32 address serialization that like SegWit addresses use, the one that starts with B1 addresses.
That's 16 versions though, right?
16 versions?
Like there could be, never mind, we'll talk about that later.
Oh, okay.
Okay, go into this one.
Basically, it has this error detection feature part of the standard, and the goal there is, let's say that I'm reading my Bitcoin address over the phone to you, Marty, and you write down a character wrong, and you paste that in a and you send a Bitcoin transaction to that address, it will detect that. The encoding will detect that you got a character wrong and potentially even give you the information necessary to fix it. Now, one thing it actually fails to do in this weird edge case is, and let me just see if I remember this right. If the address ends in a Q, you can insert an arbitrary number of P's before the Q, and no errors will be detected. No error detection will occur, and that's because of this constant that was chosen in the equation, in the formula to calculate the
random string.
Basically, the string was not an ideal choice. And if it had been any other choice other than, I think it was 1, and if it had been anything other than 1, like it'd be fine. But unfortunately, because it's 1, there's like this edge case, and it's just kind of annoying. It's not like a game. It's not a showstopper, but it just means that with Taproot now, there has to be this enforcement of the length of these addresses, whereas the goal was hoping it could be like arbitrary, but now it has to enforce that it's either a pay to pub key or pay to witness script length exactly, as opposed to arbitrary length. And I'm not knowledgeable enough to know the deep implications of all this right now off the top of my head. But anyways, this was something that was discovered in this review process, and that's actually, so it's really proven its value that this was something that needed to be addressed. The malleability was discovered earlier in the summer, but the fact that it had implications on Taproot was something that was uncovered. And so stuff like that. So it's been quite good. I'm very hopeful that Taproot will materialize next year.
Well, this harps back to complex systems, right? Like
Absolutely.
little small changes. You have no idea how it can affect everything. So I guess it's a good segue. Like, do you hope for ossification at some point at the protocol level?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question.
Like how much tinkering, like Beck 32, like great upgrades, SegWit's great. We get lightning and all that, but like how many, like is there a point at which we fuck around too much and create like too much of a weird externality that we don't know and can't control?
Yeah. Now, luckily, things like Beck 32 are encodings, and so they're not at the protocol level directly. But like Taproot is very clearly a protocol update, soft fork, and it's hard to say. These upgrades are made with a lot of foresight put in the sense that there are all sorts of version flags in different parts to make it extensible and upgradable down the road with a lot less effort. And you could argue that's not a good thing because it's easier to change. It is more likely that if it's easier to make changes, that means it's easier to introduce problems. Now, the counter argument would be the changes that are being made easier are mostly soft fork changes, so it does keep it backwards compatible.
And I would argue that the fact that there's no... So I like what you said there, that the fact that it can be changed will lead people to make bad changes. I think blockchains like Zcash and Decred that have like inherent governance mechanisms almost built in. I don't know about Zcash, definitely Decred, but like you're just like leaving an Achilles heel there. A 0 day, a social scalability 0 day, where somebody will just propose something because it can be proposed, and that may not be advantageous in the long run, right?
Potentially, yeah. It's a tough thing because Satoshi left these upgrade paths for us, and because of that, we've been able to make some of these changes that have been quite beneficial. SegWit and script updates. And so far, this extensibility has proven quite useful. And if there's any argument against ossification, it's the argument that cryptography is cryptography is built on a foundation of sand, basically, right? The fundamental idea behind cryptography is that there are these problems that we hope are hard.
Yeah, it's entropy at the end of the day, right? Like entropy exists.
Yeah. But one of the problems is that we can't prove that the problems that we think are hard are actually hard. And we've seen this over the last few decades, and this is just my opinion, and I'm sure if you ask a core dev, they'll have much more insight into upgradability and paths to upgrades and things like that. But one of the fundamental things that I think is important to acknowledge is that if we look at the last 30 years of cryptography, the cryptography that was considered government standard in the 90s, early 90s, like DES encryption, is totally broken today. They tried to upgrade it with 3DES. That's broken. And it's because these problems that we thought were hard became not hard because of either mathematical breakthroughs or computational breakthroughs. And I don't want to get into the whole quantum computing debate, but even quantum computing aside, we still can't prove that certain problems that secure Bitcoin are hard. And there might be a world someday where we need an upgrade path to keep Bitcoin secure. And the argument to keep that around, the argument to keep a culture of upgradability is that, we might need to someday for the sake of the existence of the system.
No, I really like that explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah, as close to as ossification as possible, but if need be, have an upgrade path, right? Well, that's my view.
Yeah, but I think if you compare Bitcoin to everything else, the conservative, slow, methodical approach to any change is key to its success. And I think we're going to see this more and more over the next few years, especially as all these chains that have been like the hot new thing constantly update, change, update, and then they wonder why no one's using it. Imagine if everyone had to upgrade their TCP implementation every time every time there was an internet upgrade. How many people would
the internet be around right now?
Right. Exactly. Well, and we've seen this with I think it was called Gopher, right? Gopher was this top-down designed network protocol that was better than HTTP, right? More efficient. And I think my understanding is there were updates and versions, and HTTP was vanilla. It was simple, but it just worked. And that's what won at the end of the day.
It's hard for people to grasp that Bitcoin doesn't need to be.
And it's especially hard, I think, for quote unquote smart people, because a lot of smart people.
How can a dumb thing do good things, right?
And a lot of smart people think that they can understand the complexity. They think, and that's what Friedrich Hayek calls the fatal conceit.
Oh,
right?
Dude, slashing. It's the next thing. Sharding, slashing, all that.
Yeah.
You can manage all that complexity.
Let's just add complexity. It will get better. Yeah.
So go into the Hayek quote that you're going to go into.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that doesn't just apply to economics. This is economics, but it's also technical systems. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who still think that they can reason about these insanely complex systems and it's going to work as they hope. And especially in the cryptocurrency world, where we see this approach with Ethereum especially, I think it's very misguided. And what we see with Bitcoin is 2 years being spent on what on the surface looks like a relatively simple protocol upgrade, right? BIP Taproot. But 2 years of intense, dedication to this upgrade surfaces all these like little things that, we didn't realize. And it's just a totally different approach. Whereas Ethereum's like, let's just rewrite it all.
Just rewrite it all.
And we're going to, this is actually reminds me of this Joel Spolsky, one of the founders of Stack Overflow. He has this interesting blog post about why he's
got a great blog. You should read Joel's blog.
He's got a great blog. And that he always talks, there's a famous blog post he has, which is never rewrite software. And one of the things he points out is one of the fundamental things people get wrong is if you couldn't write it right the first time, what makes you think you're going to write it right the second time? And as opposed to writing it in a way that is not perfect but works, and then iterating and iterating and iterating, smoothing out all the warts. If you just throw that away and rewrite, what you end up with is a completely new system with a whole new set of warts.
Right. And this is what Elkai Turkel, who did the chain code residency, he brought this to my, I never heard this phrase before, the second system syndrome. Basically talking about IBM when they, I guess they remade a system from scratch as well, and it failed miserably. But that's like ETH 2.0. It's second systems. Like, what makes you think the world computer the second time around is going to be A-okay?
But at the end of the day, I think the market will determine. I think we'll see this play out in the market. I think we're already seeing this play out, especially on the Ethereum side of things. Companies getting more and more frustrated with it. We'll see these new Web 3.0 blockchains that have been hyped for like the last 3 years roll out and deliver things that are kind of underwhelming, but still compete with Ethereum and ETH 2.0.
Well, that's a big question, right? Like, do we have another alt season? Like, I think
the SEC made it impossible to have a true another alt season.
Well, yeah, but like that, like not even like SEC enforcement, but like how is the market smarter than it was in 2013 and 2017? Like how many greater, like if Bitcoin wasn't flipping in 2013 and 2017, maybe one more alt cycle, but if it's around for 15 years and somebody's come at the throne for almost 2 decades and like it's all right, you're trying to spin up a new cryptocurrency, all right, get the fuck out of here.
It's hard to say. I don't think that, let's SEC aside, I don't think that we'll ever see a world where people don't try to make new money. The allure is too tempting.
It's so easy too.
Before it was a world where every government would try to make its own money, because why wouldn't a government try to make its own money, right? I mean, it's basically free money to them. So why wouldn't a person or a company try to make their own money if that gate's been open? Why would anyone not try? You know, you could, well, obviously there's the whole principle approach. There's the principle of it, right? But completely, why would a completely selfish, without any sort of philosophy guiding them, why wouldn't someone try to print their own money if they could?
My argument would be they've seen others fail so many times. Like, how many altcoin bubbles do we need to see before people realize you're not going to take out Bitcoin?
I think humans have short memories, though. There's always going to be new suckers, right? There's always a Ponzi scheme being taken down. There's always, but maybe. I mean, I think the magnitude's the frequencies and the number, I think, are going to be a lot fewer. Yeah. And we might just see it manifest itself in other ways. I mean, it morphed from this public crowd sale ICO thing. The SEC clamped down on that. It became sell to institutional investors and try to find, and the dynamic became basically you had the smart money
getting in before retail,
funding the initial idea, getting a big cut, and not even retail, getting the dumber institutional money that wasn't as well connected, bumping up the valuation, and then eventually what happens is Coinbase then lets the institutions dump on retail, right? Because that's effectively what Coinbase is now.
It's a bucket shot. Once
all the public crowd sale ICOs are over, have been on the market, like all those are already inherently on the market day one. So now what's the path for any ICO that was only given to institutional investors when it started? Well, eventually it gets listed on one of these exchanges like Coinbase. And where do you think those coins are coming from? I mean, everyone who owned it was some institution, and people buying it are Coinbase's customers. And Coinbase is basically just letting like institutions dump on their customers.
Yeah. Coinbase is the lube for fucking retail.
But now there's a counter argument here, and that's what an IPO is for equities. And that's not wrong, right? Now, this really just comes down to, do you think these coins are going to be long-term be worthless, or not. Now, Coinbase obviously doesn't. But if someone like you or I does think they're going to be worthless, then the integrity of allowing institutions to dump them on their customers is
disgusting.
Is questionable, right?
Yeah,
but
disgusting.
It's different views, different takes.
Well, let's get into why this is immoral, right? Let's get into pre-mines. I tweeted out earlier, like, I think pre-mines are 0 days on social scalability. Pre-mines are from first principles. If you do a pre-mine, you are fucked from the beginning. And from a first principle standpoint, if it is not a Nick Carter actually just wrote a piece, I skimmed through it. I haven't read it as thoroughly as I should, but I just saw that he posted a piece that, like, proof of work fair launches are the only fair launches that you'll see in cryptocurrency, and I very hardly agree with that, and or I very viscerally agree with that. And he actually proposed a new way of launching a coin, which is doing pre-sale ASICs, which makes sense to me. Again, I haven't read it thoroughly enough, but that is appeasing to me. When you compare that to an ICO and a pre-mine, it's just completely, like, an ICO pre-mine makes no fucking sense. It's not fair at all. It from first principles, it is bastardized.
It's funny how,
because in 2013, that was like, if you did a pre-mined altcoin POW launch, you were the fucking scum of BitcoinTalk.org.
well, it's funny. I was about to say the exact same thing, that, and I think we see this in like just human in society, is the line starts to slip, right? What used to be totally abhorrent and unethical becomes the norm. And
is that okay?
Well, I think there's two ways to view it. And I don't think, I fundamentally,
and I'm not saying pre-mines are bad because we decided in 2013 they were bad. I really do think from first principles, the fairest way to distribute these types of digital assets, sorry, Beautyon, is via proof of work.
Yeah.
That anybody can participate in.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. There's also the counter argument, though. There's the whole free market narrative, right? And that's like, okay, well, if you believe in free markets, then
people can do whatever they want.
People can do whatever they want, right? Now, the counter argument to that is, well, there's just because you can do whatever you want doesn't mean you should. And I still have the right to say that I think it's unethical. So I don't know. I guess I'm a realist. I think at the end of the day, if people are allowed to do it, they're going to.
Yes.
And if we're just relying on shaming, or like kind of this, or ethics to dictate like that people never do it, that's not going to be realistic. I think what we have to see play out is, and what we have been seeing play out is that economically a pre-mine is relatively detrimental to the success of the currency. And with Bitcoin, one of its biggest advantages is that it has no one to go after. It has no entity that got the initial capital. It has no founder. It just is.
And then on top of that, it has no founder only that can be pinpointed by a government or somebody, but it also has no founder that can dump on the market. Like we're finding this week with Ethereum, one of the co-founders is dumping 92,000 ETH to support his video game. People are pissed at him, but it's like, fuck you guys. Like he worked, he got this. You can't tell him not to sell those coins, right? Like, what did you expect? You made the initial offering such that he was going to get a large tranche and could do whatever he wanted with it. Excuse me.
Yep. Yeah. And, there's still, I think, probably a number of ETH whales who just got free coins in the early days and didn't do much to contribute at all to its success, waiting on the sidelines to dump at some point.
Yeah. And it's just like fascinating watching the Ethereans basically hope for altruism from these people. Like, hey, you should be investing in the system. You should be giving that money back.
I thought that was silly. Yeah. I did think that was odd that they would, at the end of the day,
I get what you're saying, but like you can't expect that.
Yeah. Like asking someone once it's their money to be like, well, why didn't you? It's like, okay, I don't know. I'm just like a pragmatist. Yeah. But for me, what I think, and I hope plays out is that, what we see is that this founderless coin without these pre-mines that attracts development for its own, that attracts developers because they're purely interested in working on it. is what is going to win out.
Is there a funding issue in the blockchain world? Is there a developer funding issue?
That's a great question. I think that it's funny that there's this argument that if there isn't funding, we're not going to be able to, support the ecosystem and build this thing out. But that line of thinking runs totally counter to the entire world of open source software. No one paid Linus Torvalds to build the Linux kernel. Now you could argue that companies now sponsor developers to contribute to it as it's become widely adopted, but still, it's just, if people care about something, they're going to work on it in the open source software world. And I think they're putting the cart before the horse. Like, funding doesn't attract interest from open source developers. Interest attracts funding.
Yeah, we're seeing that with Square Crypto, Chain Code, Blockstream.
Exactly. And, massive. I cannot begin to express how appreciative I am of Chain Code and Square Crypto and things, basically because there are, some deep-pocketed individuals who truly care about the success of Bitcoin.
Digital Garage in Japan.
Digital Garage, yeah. All over the world, we're seeing this, and that is truly sustainable development in building a sustainable open source development environment. I think what we're going to see with a lot of these VC-funded chains is there's nothing keeping these people around once they vest. They don't really care about the success of, Dfinity or anything like that. Like, maybe there's like a few people.
Doesn't that fucking piss you off though? Like, I feel like, me personally, I am in this for liberty in the digital age. I think it's an imperative that we fight this battle.
Bitcoin has people who are ride or die, and I don't think anyone else really has that.
Doesn't it piss you off, like, being a ride or die? Like, what? Like, fuck you people.
Yeah, it does. It does. But at the end of the day, like, I also acknowledge that that's like counterproductive. I mean, the only way we're going to win is if we win for merit, like on our own merit. The free market's going to be the free market. And yeah, like, I see these people raising insane amounts of money for dumb ideas, and it does piss me off. Totally. Absolutely. On what I think is a lot of marketing nonsense. And frankly, sometimes lies about what their chains are capable of doing. It definitely pisses me off, and it pisses me off that they're suckering people into investing in that. But at the end of the day, the best way to beat that and shut it down is to just outperform it and build the proper system.
So, what's the future of River Financial's product suite look like? Where are you now, and where do you want to go? You said you were talking about non-custodial options for your clients in the future. That's appeasing to me. Let's talk about it.
Great question. Yeah. So right now what we offer is buy, sell, deposit, withdraw on Lightning, on chain in 8 U.S. states. We're launching across more of the United States next year. Thanks to regulations. Got to go state by state, but it's a grind, but we're getting there. And so then on top of that, we're trying to attract people who are, interested in responsibly investing or buying Bitcoin long term. So we really try to encourage recurring dollar cost averaging buys. We actually give you a discount if you set up a recurring purchase. So, if you buy one time, the fee is a little higher than if you set up an automated buy. And then one idea we're toying with is not just an automated purchase, but an automated withdrawal. So, something you can hook up your hardware wallet, set it and forget it, and it just gets deposited there on a regular basis.
Yeah, that'd be dope.
Be pretty dope.
Right?
Yeah. And then, so, we're playing with some ideas there. And again, this stuff is because we're focusing on Bitcoin, right? Because think about what does it require to do this? It requires us to be able to interface with your hardware wallet, store your XPubs, derive the addresses that you need for your wallet, all with our backend infrastructure. And we're prepared to do stuff like this. Now, I can't promise a timeline on this. It's definitely some work, but we're working on designing it now. And so at high level, anything that touches the dollar system inherently has to be custodial. We can't, at some point, you're trusting us to, once you give us the dollars, to deliver you the Bitcoin. So there has to be trust. And I do think that society, I don't think anyone wants to live in a society where you can't trust any institution, right? A society like that is chaotic, right? Because that's basically what it means. It's a total chaos because no one can trust anyone else.
Yes, you want trust in the world. You want to be able to verify.
Right.
Like trust is good at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we want people to trust us, but I also want people to not have to trust us, right? That's kind of like the key thing for us is I want people to trust us. I want to build a company people trust, but I also want to build a company people don't have to trust. And so, so in terms of products we build out down the road, so there's the whole like custodial side of things where we're offering, people secure Bitcoin accounts where they can store their Bitcoin, and then integrating with their own self-custody, down the road. So I gave a little hint at one of the products, which is, auto withdrawing with a recurring purchase. But if you think about where we're going to be positioned is, if our users have Lightning nodes, for example, right, we could auto withdraw to their Lightning node, right, with a key send, for example, and then we can open big channels with them so that they could easily pay through us, right? We can provide convenient services for our users who have potentially, Casa HODL setups, right? Where they have multi-sig Bitcoin wallet, they have a Lightning node, but they need someone to route with them, right? Mm-hmm. They need someone to buy Bitcoin from. They need somewhere to sell the Bitcoin. All that stuff are services. All the core services that we provide, that we provide now that we can earn revenue on, are things we could provide if we don't hold someone's Bitcoin. And so that's how we're thinking about this.
No, I think that's an awesome approach, and focusing on DCA particularly. First one of the podcasts. We're an hour and 24 minutes in. I'm going to give myself props for that. Matt and I actually got dinner with a friend a week ago, and he was telling us how he had, like, as much as we've been shitting on Coinbase, that's probably the best feature they have is easy DCA. And he told us that he forgot about his Coinbase DCA, and he opened up the app. He's like, I fucking just passively accumulated more than a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
These DCA services are actually great for, whether you like it or not, for not you, particularly the listener, whether you like it or not, for holding the price up and creating like passive buying demand, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we think that we actually, we think we have the best product here. One, not because we offer just the vanilla DCA, but we offer a discount if you do set that up. And then one thing we're also very focused on that pretty much, from what I can tell, most other companies in the space aren't, is providing very insightful data around the performance of that. So on river.com, you can log in and you can see exactly your unrealized gains and losses relative to the dollar. Now, some people don't care about that because they're just focused on the number of Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, people have to pay taxes, people have expenses, and people need to know their realized and unrealized gains and losses in dollar terms. And we give you a very clear picture into that. And so
it's a huge service.
Yeah.
Like, why isn't that? Yeah. Like,
why isn't that a thing?
Right.
Yeah. I can show you after the podcast. I can show you what it looks like.
Yeah. How'd you get river.com?
That's a good question.
Was that hard?
We had to buy it. That's for sure. It wasn't free, but we went through a big process. We had to rebrand a few months ago, and we were at Alto Financial. The domain was alto.financial. We used this rebranding process as an opportunity to acquire a brand and a domain that was more premium, kind of delivered trust when a user kind of went there for the first time. We also did a lot of user research and found like a lot of people don't understand anything other than a .com. It's like confusing when people have to especially for most companies, it's not a big deal. But if you're a consumer financial product, not having a .com can be a challenge. and it often even sometimes doesn't work in certain forms. So we wanted a .com, and we wanted a name we just loved, where the trademark was available, and just kind of symbolized things that we thought were important. So we had a logo already that we really loved, and actually the logo. So my co-founder and my parents are actually from West Virginia, and so there's a bridge there, the New River Gorge Bridge. This is a very beautiful bridge, and that was actually part of the inspiration behind our logo. And so river, New River Gorge, it kind of just all
flowed together.
Yeah, exactly.
Pun intended.
There's also a lot of puns you can make with river. We keep the money flowing, all sorts of stuff.
Right? Yeah, it's like a river flowing from fiat to Bitcoin. Makes sense.
Exactly.
Very fluid.
We're a path.
Talk about liquidity a lot in this space.
Exactly. There's a lot you can do with it. And so far, the reception's been great. People really love our name.
Well, it's a dominant domain name. To get river.com is pretty huge.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Do you think it'll be worth the investment in the long run?
I think so. And if you think about it, actually, from a company perspective, a domain purchase, especially with something like that, it's an asset on your balance sheet. It's not an expense either. So it's not like we lost value as a company by spending the cash to acquire that. It's valuable in and of itself just to own that. But I think at the end of the day, like years from now, when we look back, because it was a hard decision to acquire a premium domain like this. But I'd actually been through this before with a company that I helped start up a few years ago, freewill.com. We were debating, do we buy this domain? Because it wasn't cheap. And in hindsight, years later, it's like, of course we should have bought it. Like, that's our brand. It's like such a big brand. And of course we want the .com, right? And I think we already feel that at the company. Like, of course we should have bought river.com. Like, it feels so good to be river.com.
Right. No, so like it does bring an aurora of legitimacy.
Yeah.
An aura of legitimacy.
Yeah.
Not an aurora. An
Aurora.
An aura.
Aurora coin.
Yeah, Aurora coin. You're a history buff too, man.
I love history.
What do you like about history?
I think that it's fascinating that so many of the things that happen today that cause people to freak out are so mellow compared to like almost the exact same things that have happened in the past, but to like much larger extents. And I just think like it, and so I love studying history because I think like truth is stranger than fiction. It's hard to find books that are as interesting as real things that have happened in human history. And I think also, it's trite to say, but history, like, I don't know where the saying came from, but history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes, right? Mm-hmm. But I think if you understand history, you can very clearly much more understand the world today, and also things that happen that are out of the ordinary don't throw you off as much. And you have things to relate it to, and like, oh yeah, this kind of happened in, like the Mongol Empire, blah, blah, blah. It's like, for example, like a specific example today is like, a lot of people in the United States, they go crazy about something that happens in politics or something the president says. And you look at like leaders throughout history, and there's been like so much crazier people than, Donald Trump. And it's like, it just kind of puts things in perspective. And that's what I like about it. And especially in like the Bitcoin world or the cryptocurrency space in general, it's also funny to see all this stuff, like people reinventing the wheel with like financial history.
DeFi.
Yeah, like DeFi, right?
We're revolutionizing it, man.
Yeah. I mean, like my favorite example, actually, I don't know if you've heard of this book called The History of Money and Banking in the United States by Murray Rothbard. It's a pretty cool book. I recommend anyone listening to check it out. But one of the coolest, it was actually a footnote I noticed in there, just randomly. I don't always read the footnotes. I'm not a total nerd, but I was reading a footnote on one of the pages, and it mentioned how in Maryland in the 1700s, the state issued this currency, but you only got the currency if you burned an amount of tobacco to earn it.
Proof of burn, baby.
It was, from what I can tell, the first proof of burn in history. I thought it was like Counterparty or something like that. And I love like learning that something that I thought was new and novel in today was just
centuries old.
They tried it like hundreds of years ago, and it like kind of worked.
Proof of burn, baby.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part of history?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really love Mongol history.
Yeah,
Well,
Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. Did you listen?
So that got me hooked. Dan
That's
Carlin is
His
an
4-part series of the Mongol Empire is ridiculous.
absolutely. That's
The way he describes how strong they are on horseback and how like strong their forearms were.
yeah. It just makes you feel like me feel like the lives we live are just so
Pussy.
it really I feel like a
Pussified.
pussy. Yeah, like all of these people before were all of these men were doing these crazy things, right? And I'm not saying
We shouldn't be
it
raping
doesn't
and
fit into
pillaging
my
everybody.
it doesn't fit into my ethical framework of how you should behave, right? Like I'm not saying like I want to go like conquer a country or destroy cities or anything like that, but it just like puts like my life into perspective and like how people used to live, and I just find it fascinating that these guys would Dan Carlin talks about how these guys were before Genghis united the Mongols and invaded China, they were so poor that they had to wear clothes made of the skins of field mice, right? And they're rotting off their bodies because they didn't really shower much or or bathe. And then by the time they invaded China and Genghis had united the Mongols, they invaded China, they were like richer beyond their wildest dreams.
Yeah.
And just this story of this like nomadic horse people become like controlling half the world in a span of a couple decades is insane.
Yeah, there's something like 10% of the world is Genghis Khan blood in them or something like that.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Literally descendants of Genghis Khan himself.
Yeah, and then there's also an interesting, I think, and there's also so much crazy stuff we didn't learn about in school, right? I mean, on like kind of the females in history, there's a lot of criticism of like females in history not being recognized, but and I learned it turns out that the most powerful woman in the history of the world was probably so Genghis's son Ogedei. He was drunk and died early. His wife took control after he died and there were years went by before they could find a new Khan because they have to have this whole ceremony and it takes a long time to bring together everybody. But like this woman controlled the Mongol Empire for quite a while, and she was probably, from what I can tell, the most powerful woman in the history of the world. She controlled basically like half the world.
At one point in time.
Yeah.
No, what was her name? I don't even know it.
I don't know exactly. I forgot. There's this book, The Secret History of the Mongols, that kind of goes through the history starting with Genghis, and all this stuff is named in there. But the Mongol history also hasn't really come to the surface until recent years because the Soviet Union heavily suppressed it.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, so actually in Mongolia, the capital is called Ulaanbaatar, which means red hero, like red, like communist here. And in Mongolian, and until kind of the fall of the Soviet Union, people didn't really like learn about Genghis. They didn't learn about like these Mongol heroes. They're not heroes to other people, but to the Mongols they are. And also there, because of that, there wasn't as much kind of digging into the history of it all. And so but there's been a lot of work recently uncovering more.
Yeah. It's funny. I noticed people complaining about Hillary Clinton writing about a book about powerful women and leaving out Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, did she? Yeah, that's pretty nuts, man. Yeah. This comes back to just like these weird things, like people just love to forget about history, or I don't know. It's crazy.
Oh,
It's crazy.
it's crazy, but
Yeah.
do we live in a fuck time? Does it feel to you that most people aren't paying attention?
I don't know.
That we live at like the bottom of the barrel of
I don't think we live in the bottom of the barrel.
Are we in dark times? Like, can you only tell dark times in retrospect? Can you proclaim them to be dark times while you're experiencing them, or will this be something in 20 years like, holy fuck, how the assholes live like that?
It's a good question. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know the answer. I think my personal opinion, even though I don't know, is that things are actually... I'm an optimist.
I am too.
I mean, I think that if I've learned anything over the years, I think especially in this space, there's all this kind of... People love to be doom and gloom, right? And that attracts me. It was the gold bugs, and it's like, the government's going to collapse, right? We need to be prepared. And yeah, like being prepared is one thing for the worst case, but pessimists have never changed history.
No.
You know, and so like I don't know. Like I don't really like to think we live in some like terrible time. I think it's actually pretty good. I mean, as far as I know, everyone I know, and I know people from a lot of walks of life. I mean, their lives seem better than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, just think about what we're doing right now, speaking through these metal devices that we're going to put on the internet later. And I'm somebody who can be pointed at and be like, oh, you're a doomsday, or like, you're a pessimist. And yes, a lot of my content and writing is like, what the fuck's going on? But I think it's, from my perspective, it's literally just an effort to get a different perspective out there, because I don't think a lot of these perspectives are getting the attention that they deserve.
I totally agree. I mean, I think it's
like I think Bitcoin, that the fact that Bitcoin exists, the fact that more people are learning, the fact that social media exists, even though it's a double-edged sword, I do think it will be a net benefit in the long run, even though there's some short-term terrible things that are happening. I do think everything is getting better and going up to the right, but I do think we are also at a very critical junction in human history, and a lot of things that need to be paid attention to are not being paid attention to. That's what I try to do here.
I totally agree. I think if I had to sum it up in my own words, it would be, today things are going really well. But if we don't solve some of the critical cracks that we see in our like foundation of freedom, and especially in this country, you know, some of the overreach of the government, if we don't start to push back against that harder than people have been already, we're going to see some real problems. And a lot of these issues are unfortunately bipartisan and hard to find support on either side of the aisle to help. I mean, for example, you know, in our own industry, this whole financial surveillance thing, you're going to be hard pressed to find a Republican or a Democrat who's going to help carry the flag on that one. Because all someone has to say is, what about 9/11? And yeah, well, and exactly, and that's my concern. My concern actually isn't like the part. My concern is, I think the partisanship in the U.S. is like an issue, but my bigger concern is the issues that are bipartisanly agreed on, that neither party is willing to carry the flag on.
Why not? I'm sorry. I don't want you to think I'm rude. I just put a beer order in to get some beers delivered to the studio.
That sounds awesome.
Because we're running out here.
I honestly think that some people have just, like lost the message. I don't know. I think honestly, also just like a lot of people just don't have balls these days. You know, right? It's just like people are so afraid to challenge the system, and I don't know if I'm being naive and thinking that they were any more likely to challenge it before, but I don't know. I mean, it seems people are just much less willing to really speak their minds. Well,
the system is designed in a way to incentivize people to do that, right? Like I read about today, like, debt is good.
Yeah.
Do your job, consume, send your kids to daycare.
Right.
Complain about politics, drink beer, watch sports. Just live your life the way they want you to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen Alex Jones, but I've
seen Alex Jones.
The guys, I mean, honestly, I gotta be honest, like, I think he really does a good job. That regardless of like what you think about, you know, politics, I think he does a really good job at, highlighting the things that people take for granted in the way people think.
People shit on Alex Jones. He's called a lot of shit out that's happened throughout time.
And I got to give him credit, though. He's not afraid to say what he thinks. And that's one guy who's not afraid to say what he thinks. He's not afraid. And he will get shut down. He will get kicked off of YouTube, and he will still say what he thinks, and he will not give in. And I think we need more people like that in the United States.
They're turning the frogs gay.
Yeah, putting chemicals in the water. But then you Google atrazine, and you Google the studies out of Berkeley and other schools, and you realize they actually are. These chemicals actually. Now, I'm not saying the government is, you know, necessarily putting atrazine in all of our water supply, but on purpose. But you know, you learn about this stuff, and you're like, well, atrazine is actually one of the most common pesticides in the United States, and they do studies, and it turns frogs hermaphroditic, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, there's just all this stuff that.
Yeah, he called out like the CIA spying on people and the NSA spying on people like decades ago. Like, oh, you're crazy. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not leaning in on us.
I mean, him and Joe Rogan were arrested in Texas back when George W. was governor or was president for protesting the Iraq War. And, you know, we see today kind of the fallout of that, that big, you know, what I would categorize as a big mistake in U.S. foreign policy, the cost of it all, and the second order consequences of intervening in this part of the world. You know, this comes down to the complex systems stuff, right? I think it's, but anyways, where are we getting at? Oh, you know, yeah, but it's like this whole like media industrial complex, which is just like consume, watch sports, don't talk, you know, don't poke the bear, don't cause problems, you know, just watch,
deal with it.
Watch movies, go see the actors in Hollywood. Brad Pitt has a new movie. You want to see that, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't, people might make fun of you.
You know what? We put out 20 Marvel movies last year. We got a 22nd for you right now.
I mean, you didn't watch the award ceremony last night where we gave ourselves awards? What's wrong with you?
We gave ourselves awards, and then we got up there, we accepted them, and told you not to fly on a fucking flight. Don't you dare fly. Don't eat meat.
Yeah.
Don't do what we just did all night. We all flew in on private jets, but don't you dare fucking fly, you peasant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, we need to disarm the rabble. We need to disarm the rabble peasants.
Yeah, you don't deserve one. Guns?
Think of the children.
Yeah,
You know.
crazy, psychotic, fucked up people don't kill people. It's the guns.
Just yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I do agree with you. It's like I do think we're seeing I think we're seeing the, and it's weird. This wasn't the case, I think, like 15 years ago, where it seems like we did have a healthier kind of political
Are you
dialogue
kidding
in the
me? Do
country.
you remember post 9/11 with freedom fries and all that shit? I remember
That's true, actually. I mean,
I remember being forced to vote as a 12-year-old whether or not I wanted to go to war in Iraq.
That's true. Yeah.
Like in my school.
Really?
Granted, I was in South Carolina at the time, but
Okay.
But like it was literally we ate freedom fries and there was like a vote, like there was rabble rousing at the elementary school I went to.
Wow. Well, maybe this is my own bias, just being older now and being a kid then. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the solution. I mean, but I think the weird thing that I've seen develop in this country recently, and maybe this was the case back then, but there was a different flavor of it, was there's almost this like self-righteous Puritanism, like this like class of like, you know, self-righteous Puritans who will punish you for sinning. But sinning isn't like religious in nature anymore. It's like, you know, it's questioning the, I guess like
woke capital. It's woke capital, baby.
It's woke capital.
Are you woke?
Yeah, it's like
It's questioning your wokeness.
it's like the Bible thumpers aren't really like thumping Bibles anymore. So instead, it's these like woke people thumping Bibles, but they're not Bibles. It's like government rules or something like that. I don't know.
It's
like they
it's close. Yeah,
it's kind of how I feel.
Tell us how you really feel. Alex.
Self-righteous. I don't know. I just like any self-righteousness stuff just kind of really pisses me off. People getting on their high horse about this, that, or another.
Yeah. Well, you're speaking to somebody who likes to get on their high horse about Bitcoin a lot.
That's true. That's okay.
That's one thing.
That's the acceptable one.
Yeah, but you have to be. I've come to find, especially as I've been shilling Bitcoin more.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of how you can come off as self-righteous. Self-awareness is key. Be aware. Be aware.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, you know, are we in worse case today than we were 50 years ago?
50 years ago,
or I don't know, 20. What's the right time frame to be comparing to?
I've gone back to this story many times. What spooked me out, what really pushed me to Bitcoin full blast, was when I worked in finance. I worked at a fund. My boss, the CIO, who I worked under, was born in Soviet Russia, raised in Soviet Russia, immigrated to the U.S. when he was in his mid-40s, in the mid-90s. And so I really focus on the change since 2001, since the Patriot Act.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing he noticed. He moved here in the mid-90s, and I've said this many times on this podcast. He cried in the airport because he couldn't believe like the amount of freedom he felt when he landed in the States. And since the Patriot Act and what's going on with the TSA and all the screening in the airports, he like warned me. He was like, Marty, like this is turning slowly into what I ran away from. Like be wary of that. And that's
wow.
really what really has opened my eyes to be like, all right, alarm systems alert. Like, we got to figure out, like, I do not want to end up like Soviet Russia. I don't want gulags coming to America.
Yeah. It's, and it comes back to the Stockholm Syndrome stuff. I mean, we're so desensitized to the TSA that existing now, you know, that South Park. It's like, bend over, let me wipe your asshole.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Right?
like, it's like, okay, I just want to get on my airplane. Let's hurry this
my
up.
My wife hates this, but anytime I have to go through the X-ray stand, I stand up there and just give the double bird, like in the thing. While it's like going around, she's mortified by it. She like waits, like we're not allowed. She pretends like we're not together. We'll get through security sometimes.
I don't know him.
Because every time it's just like, fuck this. Like, you're radiating my body.
You might start getting randomly pulled aside.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Well, see, here's the thing. I even feel it on myself, right? I used to travel a lot for work, my first job out of college, and I used to try to, you know how you can still opt out if you want, but like they make you wait and you go through the metal detector and you get like the full body pat down and, you know, I used to do that. And then I just got worn down. I was like, this is just too much work. It takes too much time. And honestly, you start to realize it's more complicated. It's like, because it's not that guy working there who's like the enemy.
No, it's the
right?
system.
It's like this system. And you're like, I don't want to give this dude's already had a long enough day at the TSA. Like, I don't, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just pissing this poor guy off who makes whatever, $15 an hour or something. And it's just like, and then you just feel helpless and you're like, okay, I'll comply.
That's
right?
why I think the double birds in the machine
That helps because
are very
it's in the central database somewhere.
no, and it's just effective. Everybody can see
Yeah.
it. Like, I fucking hate this thing, and you should too.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, do it. Join me.
Sending those messages
me.
is important, right?
Yeah.
You're like the smallest version of this is you've been sitting in a meeting and something's just not quite right, and then someone just says something that everyone else actually thinks, and all of a sudden it
Everybody's
just
like,
changes
thank
the
you.
dialogue.
Yeah.
Like, I think, you know, we just need more of that in society. You
Yeah.
know? It's just like someone willing to do that thing that just lets people like unlock what was kind of locked in aside in their brain.
Yeah. If the TSA forces you into that radiation machine, give them the double birds.
Yeah.
Put it loud and put it. Hey, you got free speech here. Hopefully, still middle finger. I don't think you can get arrested for that. Put it up.
Yeah.
Tell them. Send a message, not even to the TSA. But it's another, like, it goes on to, like, a lot of people like to blame the bankers. And I would blame the central banks. A lot of people like to blame, like, all the commercial banks. And yes, they're definitely culpable for very bad stuff. But at the end of the day, they're working a system that incentivizes them to work in a certain way. Like,
Yeah.
you need to change the system.
Yeah.
You can't fault the individuals working within that system.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Exactly.
I mean, you can hate the players if you want, but it's not going to change anything. You got to change the rules of the game if you actually want to change how the players act. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question. Is how do we do that?
Well, you create a system where incentives align better.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think we would both argue that Bitcoin is that system.
I agree.
We're almost 2 hours in. I think we
Yeah.
can keep going.
Let's do it.
You've got what?
I got time.
You got to get out of here by 6?
Got to get out of here by 4:30.
4:30. All right, we got an hour and 15 minutes in.
Let's do it.
Should we do a pee break?
Let's do it.
All right, and we're back after a pee break and whiskey run.
Yes.
And we're going to close it out here. I want to focus on flipping the narrative into not supporting Bitcoin as anti-American, and Bitcoin is as American as you can get. Let's dive more into this.
Absolutely. That's what I think the narrative needs to be in the United States, at least. I mean, I think every country around the world needs to take its own approach, but I think by and large, a lot of developed countries follow the example of the U.S., and this is the most important place to prevent things from going south for Bitcoin and for this idea of people choosing what money they want to use. So, I mean, and in my own personal opinion, I consider myself, American through and through. The ideals of the United States, in my opinion, revolve around individual liberty and human freedom.
Right? Did you see what came out today from the court proceedings from the ETH developer Virgil?
No.
In North Dakota?
No.
Well, it's actually pretty important distinction to draw here too. Like, he the judge specifically cited texts that he sent his parents about property owned in Puerto Rico, being out of the U.S., and then like wanting to denounce his citizenship as reasons to deny him bail, and then also tying in the fact that he told his parents that he, and this is again up to this point hearsay from the government, and it has been proven with any hard data as far as I can tell, but so what the judge is saying that one renounced, it made it apparent that he had property outside the U.S., wanted to renounce his citizenship, and then was willing to help a state enemy facilitate around capital controls. Now, that is not how I view Bitcoin. I mean, yes, it is definitely possible to do that, but I view Bitcoin as more as like an American ideal, freedom enabling technology for individuals in America. Like I don't want to go. I still have faith in the ideas of America and that we can make America a better country moving forward. Like I don't want to leave.
Me too.
And help enemies or anything like that.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things I love about Bitcoin is that everyone loves Bitcoin for their own reason, right? There's also, I think, you know, we both know the people who hate the idea of the nation state in general. I'm not one of those people. I love my country. I think the nation state is probably the most stable situation for the world to have, is a collection of nation states. And I love the United States, and I think Bitcoin can help make the United States a freer, more prosperous, more stable country. And that's part of the reason I love it.
I don't want to say ironically, but Bitcoin would do that by making the nation state smaller, right?
Yeah, or less powerful.
Less powerful.
Rein in its ability to be overbearing.
Right, and that's what Bitcoin is, right? Like we've been discussing it. It's a tool to which you can, if you want to, you can enter or exit as you wish, and if you do enter it, it is a sort of leverage stick against the incumbent system that is controlling you.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, I mean, what is Bitcoin? You know, the arguments in the Senate or, you know, in the House against Bitcoin have largely been around money laundering and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think that's secondary to one of the bigger arguments. And I forget the name of the congressman who's talking about this, but you know, he kind of got it right, which is that Bitcoin challenges the supremacy of the Federal Reserve, right? It challenges this idea that the government of the United States can control money. And this is a debate going back all the way to the founding of the country with, you know, the National Bank and the First National Bank and Alexander Hamilton and Andrew Jackson and all the debates around that. And, you know, the debate's clearly not dead, but
it has been pushed to the background, to the back burner for quite a while, though.
It has, because, you know, the central bank narrative won, at least for the time being.
Don't fuck up the money, freaks. History has taught us this.
Yeah.
There are many lessons throughout history.
And look at what they're doing. You know, after Nixon, there wasn't even gold behind the dollar. And
well, in the system, particularly, number two, another hour in, the operations that the Fed is embarking in the last 3 to 4 months, it's hairy. Like, they've had to increase the size of their balance sheet at a pace that has been seen since Lehman collapsed. The head of, excuse me, not the head of the BIS, but analysts at the Bank of International Settlements came out and said that the Fed was on the brink of experiencing multiple long-term capital management systems, or excuse me, long-term capital management like explosions within the hedge fund world.
Interesting.
Which is insane.
Yeah. I mean, you can call me crazy. I do think I do have this, beyond just Bitcoin logically making sense to me, I feel like it's almost fulfilling this weird prophecy that has been kind of written in the stars for the United States, but also for the world. And I don't know why I believe that, but it just feels right. And one of the charts that I show, you know, investors or other people when I try to explain my company is the Federal Reserve balance sheet and an arrow pointing to where Bitcoin was launched. And it's right at like this initial explosion.
The inflection point, right?
It's right at this inflection point on the Federal Reserve balance sheet. And, yeah, you know, it just feels like it's hard to describe to people who aren't in Bitcoin, but I think a lot of people like you and I share this. It's just like, it's just the right thing. It just needs to exist and it needs to happen. And, you know, with my own company, my parents were like, well, why are you doing this? I was like, the company, this needs to be built. Right. And I totally think I could this company, you know, it's totally possible that it doesn't work out, it fails, but it's more than just like this logical thing. There's almost this weird spiritual gravity. Yeah, this exactly. I think that's the best description. There's this gravity just pulling this thing and making it grow, and it's hard to explain why, but like people in it just kind of know it needs to.
If you would have told 22-year-old Marty that he'd be hosting a podcast and writing a daily newsletter about Bitcoin, you'd be like, "Go fuck yourself." Like,
yeah.
What the fuck? Like what?
Yeah.
I'm not trained to write. As you can tell, there's a lot of typos in my newsletter. I'm sorry. I try to do the best I can. It's truly from the hip. Write it once, don't read it, post it. I'm not a journalist. As you could tell too, I don't speak too good.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like,
yeah, I mean,
somebody just put a mic in front of my face. Like, it's just been this gravity. I'm like, all right, if nobody's going to produce this type of Bitcoin content for me, I'm going to try and produce it the best to my ability.
Exactly.
For other people.
But that's the mindset in Bitcoin. And that's what I love is that, you know, I think all of us at one point or another, we're sitting around asking ourselves, why isn't anyone doing X, Y, or Z? And the answer was because I'm not doing it.
If not me, then who?
Exactly. If not me, then who? And that, you know, that's what I love. That's what I love about it.
Yeah. And it's crazy the amount of crazy smart people it's gravitated towards it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what keeps me sitting around like, all right, maybe this makes sense. Talking to smart people like you.
I mean, when I'm running these Socratic seminars in San Francisco, I feel like the dumbest person in the room, man. It is, you know, there are some insanely smart people working on this stuff and writing code for it every day, and it just blows my mind the caliber of people who've decided to devote the majority of their life to this.
And especially at these bit devs and Socratic, the bit devs meetups, like there's people that nobody knows about. Nobody knows about them. They're not on Twitter. They're not on GitHub. There's like smart nerds, and they are focusing on this and can provide crazy insight, and people don't even know about them.
Absolutely. There's the anonymous people. They're not these really talented anonymous people working on this stuff, and I don't know of many things like that.
Do you think we hit a tipping point where everybody's like, why would I ever go work at a bank? Like I can work on building BTC Pay server out or something like that.
This is an interesting question. So this is something that I chew on, and especially relevant to my company is this thought experiment. Let's say Bitcoin becomes, you know, the biggest, the most widely used money around the world, right? There's still probably going to be banks.
Right.
And they're still probably to make a lot of money. So I don't know. I think today what we're seeing is a lot of very smart people who, for a lot of very different reasons, really care about Bitcoin. And they're willing to put their economic self-interests in a way over their own personal interests. Or sorry, they're willing to put their own personal belief in this and value that higher than their own economic self-interest. Because the majority of people working on Bitcoin stuff could probably be making more money working either in big tech or finance. Because at the end of the day, Bitcoin, there's money in Bitcoin, but there's not that. I mean, you know, with the market cap of Bitcoin's what is it now? Like what,
150 around.
$50 billion. I mean, okay, but like Apple, you know, has earned over $1 trillion in the last 10 years, right? Like, you know, there's a lot of money. There's more money elsewhere. So
yeah, but that's also what gives you hope to stay around, right? Is that there's people.
It just attracts something, but I think that's what makes it so promising, is that despite the lack of quote unquote funding, all these people are willing to dedicate their life to it.
Dev incentives, man. Where are the dev incentives?
Where are the dev incentives? Yeah. The dev incentives are philosophical. And that's something that you can't replace. That's something you can't ever buy from somebody.
And it pisses a lot of people off.
Yeah.
That's how we explain it. It's like, yeah, it's just philosophically driven. They're like, what? No.
And the most fascinating part of this is from what I can tell, a lot of devs have very diverse philosophical reasons for caring about Bitcoin. And I think that's that if anything, that makes it even more permanent, because it's almost like all these people from different walks of life, from different countries, from different social backgrounds, with totally different worldviews, like have come together to care about this. And it's at the intersection. And that's what's so powerful about it. It's like Bitcoin is like this, it sits at the intersection of so many different worldviews, that people from everywhere tend to really care about it.
Yeah, no, my favorite funny dichotomy of worldviews that get along in Bitcoin is the vegans versus the carnivores.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I have multiple, vegan friends in the Bitcoin space, and multiple, very carnivore meat maximalist people, and it's just funny that
two polar
opposites can come together in
right?
digital money,
right?
Magic internet money.
The vegan account. Shout out to the vegan account.
Yeah.
They love TFTC.
Oh, yeah?
They read, yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. It's, yeah. I'm not personally a vegan, but
no,
to each their own.
Yeah.
And shout out to you freaks out there.
And then there's also the more fascinating thing for me is you get the socialist types of people who see Bitcoin as a means of enabling, the oppressed of society. You see the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist people who see Bitcoin as a means of escaping the government oppression of society. And then there's the technical people who just think it's really cool to work on technically. And then, there's the traders, right? Who just care about flipping it, and
then you have
get sucked in.
And then you have the people backed in the corner who actually fucking need it and are using it. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You have the people who straight up can't get a bank account, and Bitcoin, they fell into Bitcoin because that's the only option.
Yeah. And that's why I hate it's almost like a virtue signal to hate against certain use cases of Bitcoin versus another, when really they all sort of make the other one possible, right? Like the speculators are providing liquidity for the people looking to skirt capital controls in certain countries.
Absolutely. And I think, that's another sign that it's good money, because good money is something everyone wants. Every single person in the world pretty much wants that. We'll accept that, regardless of where they come from, what they think, any of that. Anyone in the world will accept $1 basically, or $100 bill. They see that as valuable. Bitcoin's hopefully gonna be the same thing.
No, but it's funny to watch people excuse me, burping, whiskey burp there. Watching people try to shame others for using Bitcoin in certain ways. Like, come on, just let people do what they need to do the way they need to do it, and work. Again, like we're saying, like when you try to educate people about Bitcoin, you try to first get a perspective from which they would understand it best. And for people from Venezuela, they would escape hyperinflation. For people in America, or not even hyperinflation, cross-border capital controls. People in America escape just holding your money in a bank account that could be confiscated from. Like, you use it as a store of value, just use it as a savings account.
Yep.
But all these use cases can work in harmony, and they are.
Yeah, I think kind of one of the silliest things that I've seen is like the shaming of people for. One of the silliest things I've seen is the people shaming people for quote unquote hoarding it, and how rich people are using it now. And the thing I like to say is, have you ever met a poor person who doesn't want the same money a rich person uses? There are projects out there that I think have been very naive in trying to, build, well, I call it, frankly, they're trying to make money for poor people, right? It's like money, these crypto projects making money for, people they think are, the disenfranchised in society. And I think it's so misguided, because poor people don't want money rich people don't also want.
Right.
Like, have you ever met a poor person who doesn't also want $1 or doesn't also want the same money Bill Gates has?
Well, that's what I like.
And it's silly. It's totally silly.
It's incredibly silly because you have to view money as a tool, like water. It's like water. Like anybody in the world, criminals, straight people, gay people, black people, white people can access water.
Yeah.
And if they can access water, they can drink and hydrate themselves. Same goes for Bitcoin. If you can download the blockchain, connect to the internet, you can access that too.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it serves everybody.
Yeah.
Socioeconomic, race, sexuality, gender, whatever it may be.
And I think the end conclusion that a lot of people kind of fail to really understand is that if something is good money, people are going to use it for stuff you don't like. You know, whether that's unsavory activities or whether it's just things like you're personally opposed to, like hoarding it or spending it on, things you don't approve of, or, it's just.
No, that's the other thing. Like, what is unsavory? What is unsavory today may not be unsavory tomorrow.
Exactly. It's like speech, right? There's free speech is important because everyone has their own definition of what people what's okay to say. And so we just say, pretty much everything should be okay to say with some small caveats, but like those caveats are pretty universally like agreed upon in the United States.
And what are those small caveats? Like, don't scream fire in a movie theater.
Right. Yeah. It's like stuff. It's like the basic things that I don't know. I'm not a legal. I'm not going to pretend I'm some constitutional law scholar. So
yeah, but it feels like people are today more than ever. Right. Like, and again, the optimist and the pessimist come and go.
Yeah.
Like today more than ever, it seems like people are willing to cede their freedom of speech in an attempt to be woke.
It's what it feels like.
In an attempt to virtue signal.
I mean, I have some British friends who definitely just value it less. I mean, to them, it's a very uniquely American thing. The First Amendment.
Where'd you get these British friends?
Well, just school and things like that. But
yeah.
It's just interesting, kind of debating these ideals with them, and then I realized how unique our country is, and how much foresight the founding fathers had, writing the First Amendment into the Constitution, because that has saved us from so many government overreaches.
What's the conversation with the Brits usually like?
It's usually like, well, why should you be allowed to say something that's hateful or bigoted or, offensive, right? And then I try to explain to them like why trying to define offensive inherently creates this power structure that is used to oppress people at the end of the day. And, they don't really it doesn't really resonate with them because it hasn't happened to them yet, like them personally, right? It's happened to other people in the UK and in these other countries, but not them. Yeah. And they, you point to someone who said something like, he was that guy in Scotland, or he had his dog do a Nazi salute on YouTube, right? And he ended up like having to pay some fine because he was like a comedian or something, and his dog did a Nazi salute. And you kind of point to stuff like that, and they're like, well, he deserved it because, why should you do something like that? And it's like, well, it's kind of you just end up kind of talking over each other. You're not on the same wavelength, and it always comes back. It reduces to this like, well, he shouldn't have been allowed to do that, should he? And then you're kind of stuck in this weird like it's just never very fruitful. No, it's totally different worldviews, frankly.
Right? Because I'm like, how that like
it's just people are just
if you can't hear the absurd, like.
Yeah.
People. And again, it's like not like we're trying to justify anything either. It's just like this is where the whiskey kicks in. You're like have to think about.
Regardless, I think that in this country, we're blessed to have the protections we do have.
Yeah. It's like. Again, like the virtue signaling woke capital theme, like it's just getting to a point where people aren't even critically thinking for themselves, and they're just parroting stuff and trying to tell other people to shut up. Like don't say that. And it's It's a bad situation because, like, again, like you said, like who decides what is right and what is wrong.
And I think the reason that this debate feels like it's getting so out of whack is because of the internet and social media. And what we're seeing is, I think, like, personally, I haven't personally experienced these issues in real life that much. I haven't really experienced too many people in real life, getting outraged because I said something that, offended them or something, or things like that. Here and there it happens.
I haven't either.
Yeah, it's like, it's this dynamic of these, I don't know how to solve it. Basically, we have these web apps, basically these very large web applications, Twitter, Facebook, etc., and they become these places where people talk. But lots of people talk.
Context is missed, though.
Context is missed
through these digital mediums.
And then people say to these platforms, hey, why aren't you stopping this guy from saying this? Or why aren't you you don't think being a Nazi is okay, do you? And they're like, well, no, I don't think a Nazi's being okay. Then why haven't you banned him? And then that's where it starts, right? And like, there's some like, what is it? Godwin's law. Like, it always like every conversation on the internet like devolves into Hitler or something. Like,
I haven't heard this.
And it's really funny. It's really funny because I made a Reddit post announcing River like a week or two ago, and then weirdly one of the threads devolved into talking about Hitler.
Really?
Yeah. It was like, I can't remember. It was like which countries are you available in? Or it was like, why are you only available in the USA? And I said, well, because that's just where we're like allowed to operate right now. We don't have the international like regulations or approvals from these other countries yet. It takes time. And one of the guys, and then one of the responses was, are you available? Like, well, you should be available in other countries. And I said, well, where are you? He goes, Europe. We don't really care about nation states too much, though. And then some other guy like responded, well, the UK does. And then like they started devolving into like, well, America's better than the UK because we have guns. And then like that devolved into like Hitler. And then it was just like, anyways. So that's like what the internet conversations are. But anyways, then these like web apps, people are like, well, why aren't you banning certain types of speech? And then they go, well, maybe we should, because, well, why should people be allowed to say this on our site? That kind of makes us culpable, right? I don't know solution.
No, it's a slippery slope. It's a hairy slope. It's weird. And it's, again, like going back to like we were born at this inflection point and we are literally experiencing this stuff for the first time as a species, as a social being.
Exactly.
Like how to interact with these technologies, and it's trial and error at this point. But what the fuck was I gonna say? It's something like profound, not profound, but I guess something good to say. Rockstar Dev, he I guess I forget what company, they had a problem where like their Slack communications got leaked.
No.
And like it was like, oh, they had a terrible company culture just because everything was on Slack. And Rockstar Dev made a good point, like you can't.
It was a suitcase company.
Away,
right?
Yeah, it was away.
Yeah.
But like that's a problem when you just rely on that one medium of communication for your whole communication, where you can't really hash out like hard problems like via text. Like you need to hop on a one-on-one call and like have a conversation with people.
Yeah,
like that is not happening in modern companies when it should be. And that's why I'd like to do the podcast face to face. Like I think there's a lot more value in like looking somebody in the eye and actually like getting the feeling in the air and stuff like that, and getting inflection and stuff like that to have a better conversation and actually get to the cores of the problem, right? And
absolutely,
it's like genuine communication is getting abstracted in the digital age.
Absolutely. And the cost of saying something to someone that is incredibly, I don't like the word offensive, but just incredibly like brash and just devoid of any sort of manners or respect is so much higher in real life, right? On the internet, there's no cost whatsoever.
None.
You spin up an anon account, like you can say whatever you want to
if
someone.
you're like, hey, you fucker to your face.
Yeah,
it's
fuck
like,
you,
It's like, what, dude?
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. Someone says that to you in your face, something might happen, right? If there's like physical consequences, and it's just, I don't know what this is gonna turn into on the internet.
Well,
and I don't know the solution either, because I don't think this whole idea of like open source thing, I don't think it really solves the problem.
No. Again, they're just tools, right?
Yeah, they're just tools.
It's also like at the end of the day, it's social, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we do live in meat space.
And it transcends.
We are organic beings. Like,
it transcends cultures too, is the other issue. Like we, day to day, we interact with our own kind of people, for lack of a better term, people who kind of generally share our own views on the world in the United States, at least. And then, you got people from any other country in the world also in the system. And, you say something on Twitter about Muhammad, and all of a sudden Pakistan government sending Twitter a notification that you broke Pakistani blasphemy law, and Twitter has to send that to you, and you're like, what the hell? Like what? What am I like? What dystopia am I living in that I'm like subject to like Islamic law, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts.
Yeah, but again, and we are the guinea pigs for these technologies, right? That's the thing that freaks me out. The trends in social media with kids in middle school is like, particularly girls, is like scary as fuck, man. Like increased self-harm and suicide rates.
Really? I mean, that didn't surprise me. I haven't been following that.
Like social media, somebody who has nieces and nephews and cousins who have children, it's like, fuck, like,
yeah.
We really don't know the full repercussions of these technologies on psychology. And there's definitely, like the price of Bitcoin, the volatility of the consequences of this technology, I think is going to be pretty high in the first few decades of this transition into the information age.
It's a shock to the system for sure. I wouldn't be surprised. I'd like to see a survey from these Silicon Valley executives about how many of them let their kids. What ages do they let their kids have access to this stuff? The more I get,
it's like,
I think
as social beings, like it's all about clout and all that. And what does social media incentivize?
But I don't know. I think we're seeing understanding of this. Do Mark Zuckerberg's kids have access to iPads and iPhones? I'd be surprised if they do. I know Chamath Padapatiya, he doesn't let I don't think he lets his kids have Facebook, and he was an exec at Facebook for a long time. And I personally probably won't let my kids have access to any of that stuff. I don't have kids, but once I do, because I see it, right? When you're a kid, you don't understand, and it's just too much. I don't know. I think we are still learning to live with this.
Yeah,
it's hard. I had to delete. I deleted these apps from my phone. I have Twitter now because there's a lot of inbound business stuff on Twitter, but Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, I just deleted from my phone. I log into my desktop every now and then.
I deleted my Facebook. I still need to get rid of Instagram. I like Instagram because I get to keep in touch with my family. I use it mainly for family, using it as a conduit to keep in touch with what my cousins and brother and sister are up to and stuff like that. But I'd rather not share that there. But no, it is. There was a Rogan episode. I forget who it was with, but they just walked through the rates of self-harm and depression.
Totally. You're always comparing yourself.
Yeah.
Especially at a young age where you haven't really had time to become your own person and kind of get to the point in life where you're like, I am who I am. Other people are who they are.
Well,
I don't give a fuck.
Like at a young age, like everything's so important.
Yeah.
Right? Like everything's the biggest thing in the world.
Can you imagine? I think we're about the same age, right?
Yeah,
I'm 29.
I graduated college in 2013.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I'm trying to imagine myself in middle school and high school were hard enough of the time. Like as like a teenager, adolescent, if I had, and I remember when I was in middle school, like AIM was like the thing. And I didn't really, I kind of had AIM, but I didn't really, I wasn't like cool enough. But I'm just trying to think back, like if Instagram was a thing when I was in middle school, that would have just totally like been crazy.
Dude, I remember MySpace. Like that's when I was in middle school, tail end 8th grade. So I was like,
8th grade.
I got MySpace, and like I remember being stressed out about my top 8. Like, who are my top 8 friends? Like,
Yeah.
am I gonna disappoint? Like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Like, are they gonna include me if I don't include them? Like,
Yeah.
And that's stupid shit. Now I'm like, who the fuck cares?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you're an adult now, right? But when you're a kid, that can really mess up your life.
right?
Like you post the wrong thing.
And like your
the internet
brains
doesn't forget either.
yeah, and your brain's at such a point where it's so malleable, and like
Yeah.
the impressions that are had on your psychology at that point are much more impressionable than you have in later years in your life. And
You start getting like ADD from like just this constant like swiping and scrolling. I mean, I even kind of feel it now. Like I feel like
I'm addicted to Twitter.
I feel like I struggle to really just sit and concentrate now. That's something I'm like, one of my goals for 2020 is like to try to improve that.
Me too.
When I was a kid, I could sit down and read a book. You know, I feel like it's kind of messed me up.
No, me too. No, and as we're having this conversation, I must say I'm not immune to any of this either. I am very much susceptible to this myself, even
totally.
as an adult. Like I am addicted to. My name is Marty Bent. I'm addicted to Twitter. Like I
think that's the concern, though. Is like the adults realize what's happening to them, and it's
Yeah.
happening to them. What's happening to their kids, right?
right.
But I don't know if Bitcoin fixes this.
I don't know
I don't
either.
think so.
No, but again, these are like, are we just like a transition fucking generation? Do we have to fucking come to grips with that? Like we're just like the guinea pigs, and
Are we going to be the, laughing stock of our grandkids? We were that dumb generation that couldn't figure out how to really deal with all this stuff.
could you blame us though? In
No,
retrospect,
I don't think so.
I mean, look at the fire hose of technology that's been fucking thrown at us the last 3 decades.
It's crazy.
Like, I mean, shout out to humans. Like,
Yeah.
we are very adaptable. Like, shout out to us for adapting as quickly as we have.
It's pretty incredible.
We may not be handling it as good as some people may like to think, but considering the degree of change the last 3 decades specifically, I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping up with the pace. I mean, we're here talking about Bitcoin right now.
Yeah, I agree. And then and what's this younger generation gonna do? I mean, 10-year-olds today were born in a world with Bitcoin, right? 10-year-olds they're people, right? They're like real, like they know what they're doing. They've got their own opinions about stuff. I'd be interested to hear what these kids are talking about, and that's one place because, I'm part of at this phase in my family where we don't really have too many really young kids. So I don't really have access to like talking to too many young people and hearing what their thoughts are about things. But I'd be curious to hear about like what are high schoolers thinking about Bitcoin, or middle schoolers, right? What are these kids who grew up in a world with Bitcoin thinking about it? I don't know if you have any insights there, but I'm curious about that stuff.
No, I don't. I'm curious as well. I mean, I'm very grateful that like I have a very large extended Irish Catholic family, and a lot of my cousins and extended family members have started to have kids over the last decade. So we're getting to that point where what's it all going to look like in 10 years?
Bitcoin? Yeah, that's good. I mean, yeah. Like,
Can Bitcoin fail?
Absolutely. I think Bitcoin can fail.
How?
I think it will definitely fail if we stop thinking it can fail. I think that's like that's one of the best parts about Bitcoin is everyone is so adversary. Everyone is so.
Don't ever get complacent.
Don't ever get complacent. Never forget that the things you love can be taken away if you don't protect them. In 10 years, I'm trying to think, like when Bitcoin came out 10 years ago, what would I have thought 10 years would look like?
11 years already.
11 years. What would I have thought that it would look like? I don't know. I mean, I think that if there's any, people have said this, if there's any like central bank that decides to hold some Bitcoin reserves in publicly, I don't know if that's actually privately been the case at all. Like that might just set like a whole other world of activity off. Like I don't know what would happen then. If we don't see that,
That's an admission, right?
it's like an admission. Like that's like the system admitting that there's something here.
I think enterprise blockchain will hopefully completely die within a year or two. I think it's like starting to like.
Is R3 still around? Or R-Chain? What is it?
I think it's still around. Although they've raised so much, these companies have raised so much money, they've gotten so much revenue from clueless CEOs who don't want to miss blockchain.
Didn't Ripple just raise $200 million?
Yeah.
Like a Series C $200 million round?
Yeah.
What the fuck? Who was giving them that money?
Well, it's access to the cash flows from selling Ripple.
And they have a shit ton of $100 billion.
Yeah.
10% of a trill. They printed themselves.
I mean, hey, you got to give it to them. It's pretty genius from a cash perspective. I mean,
how are they able to get away with that, dude?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm not going to name names, but you go look at their board.
Ben Lawsky, you motherfucker. I'll name the name. Fuck you, Ben.
You know,
Alex does not agree with me. He does not co-sign that statement, but I will say it myself. Fuck you, Ben Lawsky.
You know, I think if you like, you know, Bill Clinton spoke at their event, right? They have the powerful people on their side, and like, how are you gonna compete with that, right?
Ideas. We need to get more ideas out there.
Should Bitcoin make some donation?
We need more.
Send some Bitcoin to the
brave
Clinton
men.
Foundation.
We need bravery.
We do.
We talk a lot about like.
We do need bravery.
Well, like, do we live in a world of timid men? Like, is there enough brave men in the world?
So, I mean,
are there enough brave men in the world?
There's an interesting tie back to the Mongols here. The Mongols, after they conquered China, and they were living the life of luxury in the cities of China, would send their kids back to the steppe to grow up, because you couldn't become a man if you grew up in a city living with the creature comforts, you know, of the Chinese cities, tremendously wealthy. You know, you had to grow up on the steppe in the harsh weather, riding horses and providing for yourself, shooting bows, riding a horse by the time you're old enough to walk. And yeah, do we live in a world of weak men? I think that there's a lot more than there were post World War II, when most men had to go fight for their lives. Not most, but a lot. Men had to go fight for their lives. They saw, you know,
an existential crisis.
Yeah, the hardships of the world. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but hard times create good men. You know, I didn't create that saying, but I think it's generally true. And we don't live in hard times.
We definitely don't live in hard times. And we definitely have a lot of soft men walking around this world.
Yeah. And, you know, how far do you take that, right? Should people be willing to stand up and go to prison? Well, I don't think it's fair to ask anyone to do that, because no one else has. No one, you know, it's easy to say, much easier said than done, right? I don't think that's necessarily going to move the needle
goal
anyways.
that you want either, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you look at what happened with the Silk Road, right? And this guy, you know, made a website that other people sold drugs on, and he ended up life in prison without parole. And I think that, you know, regardless of what you think about drugs and drug law, it does make everyone stop and think, like, fuck, you know, like, the dude didn't even like kill anybody. He didn't even kill anybody. He didn't even like touch anybody.
That's what they'll try to make you think he did.
They're trying to make you think he did, with, like, you know, and there were like straight up corrupt agents on this case, and they made an example of this guy.
Right.
And how do you compete with, like, what do you do, right?
He's like,
and I'm not saying like, you know, I want to be like,
none of us want to be martyrs or anything.
No, you know, no one wants to be a martyr, right? Like, why? We already live in a pretty good life. No one's starving in our country.
Well, there are people starving here.
Well, in the world, but I don't know about the U.S.
There's people starving in the U.S.
Really? Maybe.
Not to death. Yeah, that's true.
Well, I mean, okay,
Yeah.
going hungry, sure. Like,
Yes. Yes.
having food
Right.
insecurity, sure.
Yes.
Sorry, I meant like literally starving to death. But
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Totally. Absolutely. I mean, there are people who are definitely struggling for sure. But yeah, anyways.
No, I'm sorry. I fucked that up.
No, it's totally fine. It's like, I guess it's a loaded word, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really do have optimism that if enough people just push to change the narrative, we can really make progress. I really think narratives are very important. Memes are important, right? Just turning the narrative on its head. I think it's almost a benefit that a lot of this stuff isn't a partisan issue. Because that also means that there isn't a whole class of people really dedicated to fighting you either.
Yeah, right. And what I put it is like, what do you think is the least amount of effort somebody could do to contribute to the conversation or contribute to, like, somebody who might be a little timid because they don't want to get on a list or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing to do is just ask the questions, if you're somewhere, talking with your friends, talking with a politician, talking with a congressman, talking with a regulator, like, ask the questions respectfully. And I think it's important to understand that respect is very important here, because I also truly think that regulators aren't out to ruin America. They're not out to ruin the world, right? I've met regulators face to face, and it was actually very insightful and interesting conversations I've had with them, and I walked away from that with a lot of, with a totally changed perspective. And that was, these regulators actually, I mean, the ones I spoke with, you have to understand what they see every day, right? They see literal criminals who are actually hurting people, and their job is to make sure that doesn't happen. And right, so they create these rules to try to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, you can agree with whether these rules are misguided or not, but you have to understand you have to put yourself in their shoes, right? A lot of these regulators see, for example, at the state level, they literally see companies stealing money from retirees and running away with their money. And their job is to make sure that doesn't happen, right? And at the federal level, a lot of these people, they literally see, terrorist people who are killing other people, laundering money. And their job is to make sure that these people can't be successful in what they want to do. And it's important to understand where other people are coming from in these conversations, basically. And I think that if we have to be able to have a dialogue if we're going to make any progress here, is what I'm saying. And I think that comes down to educating, engaging in dialogues with the higher ups, with the regulators. I think the biggest mistake a lot of people in the space make, especially a lot of entrepreneurs, is sitting around kind of just complaining about the regulators, complaining about the laws, instead of actually. But how many people who've sat around complaining about it have actually just called someone up? The phone number is on the webpage of the .gov website for whoever the regulator is. How many of them called them up and be like, "Hey, I'd love to chat and talk with you about some of this stuff."
You're just aiding and abetting the state, bro.
Yeah,
Why even engage?
These people at the end of the day are people with families who, frankly, a lot of them, their jobs aren't always that interesting. They'd love to talk about it. They'd love to hear your perspective. A lot of these people. So I think it's important to remember that.
Yeah, I especially that there are people with families at the end of the day behind this stuff.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of whom actually find this stuff pretty cool. Well, most people find Bitcoin, I think, pretty cool. A lot of these people also find Bitcoin pretty cool. They just, their job is to make sure that people can't, these companies, the bad actors aren't stealing people's money, or bad actors aren't funneling money to terrorists. And that's a reasonable goal.
Yes, and I believe that is the happy medium. We need to focus on is the trade-offs, how much information needs to be seeded by everybody to achieve that goal.
Totally.
Right?
Totally. And I think that's the conversation that needs to be had. If you kind of come at them guns blazing with, fuck the system, you're not going to get anywhere. It's just, and honestly, it doesn't even resonate with the majority of the country. And so, I think it's just important to keep that in mind for people in the Bitcoin space, is that the dialogue is going to be much more productive if you understand where the other people are coming from.
You statist.
Yeah, you know.
A kid. I'm fucking with. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Like, and not just like, I mean, it's always important to see the other perspective, right?
Absolutely.
Or at least try to.
Very few of these people are sitting around.
If only
going,
because you can strengthen your own case, right?
Yeah, totally. Very few of these people are sitting around. None of these people wake up every morning going, how can I ruin the United States? Or how can I oppress or take away people's freedom today? Right? That's not what they wake up saying. That's not what these people like care about, right? These people wake up thinking, either it's just their job, right? Or like they wake up every day thinking like, okay, my job today is to make sure that, retirees don't get their money taken.
Yeah. And they're trying to do what's right.
They're trying to do what's right.
And if you voice that you think that like data collection and financial surveillance and inflated money are not right, maybe they'll try to protect those rights. You just have to voice that opinion that, hey, that is where the public wants to be protected.
And they may have never even been exposed to these ideas or understand that, like, a lot of regulators aren't necessarily spending all day reading Hacker News or Reddit or understanding the implications of computer systems with all this information and the second order implications of that, right? Calmly explaining to them like the issues at play here is also very useful. And I think we just need more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think everybody wants to just enjoy their lives and get to go about their lives.
Yeah.
Without having to worry about any of this shit. That's the thing. Like, when are we not going to have to worry about this shit? Right?
And I think you brought up a good point, and it made me think of something is, maybe the answer here is, the real thing that they want is like an alternative, right? Okay, if the Bank Secrecy Act isn't it, right? If collecting all of your social security number, your address, and doing all this KYC and getting your ID, blah 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 blah, if that's not it, if that doesn't solve if that's overreach, and we don't need to do all that to solve the problems we want to solve, which is shutting down certain crimes, then what's an alternative that does protect the privacy of people? And maybe that's the solution, right? Maybe we as an industry get together and like propose an alternative. And I haven't really seen much work being done there.
No. And hey, any of you freaks listening out there, if not you, then who?
Right.
If not you, then who?
Because we can't sit here and say, fuck it all. That's never going to fly, right? Come up with something better.
And put it out there.
Yeah, put it out there.
Battle test it.
Get, work with Coin Center, work with some of these nonprofits, put together a memo or a law. Go talk to some legislators. Talk about this national security implications of having everyone's financial data in these databases that the Chinese could access. Spin the narrative, right? Like talk about the actual downsides
of KYC AML. The downsides far outweigh the upsides, my opinion.
Yeah.
Equifax, like all these hacks are, everybody's financial data is on the black market, and people are getting identity frauded left and right. Like
absolutely.
Credit card frauded left and right. I'm making up verbs right now, but it's happening.
The government, OPM, the Office of Personnel Management in the government, was hacked years ago at this point, and basically anyone who has ever worked for the government had their social security number and personal information leaked. If that's not a national security issue, I don't know what is.
Right. Like imagine
all the identity theft. Imagine identity theft of government employees.
Well, here, this is a tweet I sent out years ago at this point, but it was like 2 years ago when Equifax was hacked. Like, so they have all that identifying information. Like, imagine if somebody with the Equifax hack data basically just quasi DDoS'd the IRS with fake tax returns.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where it's like they have all that tax information. You can literally file fake taxes on behalf of other people. Like, say somebody, like a hacker, has my tax information. They filed like a tax return where I gave back a bunch more money than I wanted to on my behalf. And I was like, well, I didn't file those taxes. but like just because they had that information, they were allowed to file that information. Like you could attack that system with that information if somebody was basically dedicated to do that. Actually, now that I think about this, somebody came back and said that would not be possible. So that was the thought experiment. It may not be possible.
Interesting. But I mean, regardless, I think there's still a lot of attacks that could be made.
Right.
And I think the conclusion that we may have come to here is if you can't just be anti something, right? You have to propose an alternative and why, and give reasons why it's better.
Yes. And so I proposed Bitcoin because it's a push system, and I would highly prefer that to the pull system that we live in today.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about ACH.
All right. Let's talk about, what about ACH? What are your thoughts on ACH?
Well, push versus pull is interesting, right? Because pull does create a lot of efficiencies. You don't have to think about stuff, paying your bills, right? You just pay it. You don't have to approve every single payment. But in the United States, we have this automated clearinghouse system, ACH, which is how all the one of the ways that banks move money around, and we move money from our bank accounts to merchants and things like that. And anyone who's a member of it can pull funds from any bank account in the country, basically, unless your financial institution requires approval, which it can add. But most accounts don't have that. Most individuals have a bank account where any merchant in the ACH system can pull funds from the bank account. Now, the kind of saving grace here is that if someone pulls money from your bank account and you didn't authorize it, you just call up your bank and they reverse this, and then the bank of the person who pulled the money is on the hook for it. The person, the merchant who pulled the money is on the hook for that money, right? So it's a weird system, and it feels highly insecure, but it kind of works, but it doesn't really work that well. It could be a lot better, probably. But yeah, it's a weird system.
You have a system where, like here in New York City, like one company, like because he had access to ACH, like he pulled, like I'm pretty sure like a payment processor like pulled money from people's accounts and just like ran away with it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Here in New York.
I mean, and once it's pulled, it's pulled. If their bank didn't stop, typically banks require a merchant to have a kind of like bond on hold with them. But if you pull more than that, right, and you want to run away with it, then yeah, who's responsible? You just rely on the legal system at that point. But at that point, once it's in the legal system, you're kind of fucked because, I mean, the lawyers walk away with...
You lost out on the present value of that money.
You lost out on the present value. Two, the lawyers have probably walked away with a good half of it. I don't know. The lawyers end up walking away with a lot of it, and then how much has already been spent? Who's it going to come from at the end of the day?
Right.
Right. Like, so
It's fucked.
But yeah, if you write a check to someone, they have your account and routing number, right? So if they have access to the ACH system, they can pull from your account. If you don't notice, which is pretty likely, honestly, for people not to notice, because people these days have so many bills, things are automatically paid. No one's going to notice $10, $20. I mean, not no one, but a lot of people won't unless you're paying close attention. Because how many people willy-nilly sign up for Spotify? $10. Netflix, $10, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm sure, whatever, that's something, and you just make it look legit. They could even like make it look,
right
in maybe Spotify
with
you're like, oh, okay, yeah, looks legit.
Spotify all capitalized, the I is just lowercase l, something like that.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So and now there's other countries with kind of alternative systems that are push based. Actually, I used to work for a Bitcoin company that was in Taiwan, and the money moved instantly there. And actually, but it's a different culture. People had card readers at their computer at home. They would have, if they wanted to send money, they could actually put their card with a chip. They plug this reader into USB in their computer, put their card with a chip into that reader, and pay. And
Holy
pay instantly. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then also another way people would pay was...
I never knew this.
Yeah, and the way we would sell people Bitcoin was an alternative way was we say, how did it work? Yeah, so let's say you wanted to buy like 1,000 Taiwan dollars worth of Bitcoin, right? So you enter 1,000 Taiwan dollars. We give you a bill to pay. This bill is like a thing you print out, and you go to 7-Eleven or Family Mart or one of the convenience stores, and you pay them 1,000 Taiwan dollars in cash, and they mark this thing as paid, and it hooks back to our system, and it tells us you paid it, and
They get the Bitcoin.
they get the Bitcoin, and eventually the cash gets deposited to the company's account. But now there are things like that in the U.S., kind of like MoneyGram, Western Union, or I think Western Union didn't acquire them, but they're a separate company, MoneyGram, and so MoneyGram is at CVS's, and you can do that kind of stuff. But good luck if they let a Bitcoin company use their platform, because they probably won't.
Fuckers.
And most banks in the U.S. won't let a Bitcoin company even have an account.
Well, that's what makes me like a little pessimistic. Like, do you think they're going to attack Bitcoin, the incumbents? Like,
I don't know. The nice thing is that there has been a niche of banks that have allowed Bitcoin companies to use them, and they have made a good amount of money on that.
like Silverbank,
Silvergate. Yeah, there's a number of them. And
Silicon Valley Bank. Right?
yeah, SVB, I don't know if they still are. They at least were. And as this space grows, there's more and more incentive for banks to do this. The reason banks are hesitant is because of the compliance risk, basically. A bank charter from the government is a privilege, right? Not a right. And they don't they don't want problems from the FDIC. Because if you look at the numbers, right, the cryptocurrency space is tiny compared to the economy, right? So why would Bank of America risk regulatory action to service
A pimple on their ass.
a pimple? Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
If you put yourself in their shoes, it doesn't make any sense, right? So again, this will just come back to looking at the system that we've created.
Yeah. Do you think we can slowly wean ourselves off?
This is an interesting question because I don't know the answer. There are two ways this could go, right? If Bitcoin, a good thought experiment is, if Bitcoin becomes a widely used money in the United States, does the government just apply the same regulations and you just get absorbed into the regulatory state? It's probably likely, right? But even if that happens, I still argue we're better off. Because at least you can completely control your Bitcoin, whereas you can't really with cash. I think it's still strictly better, right? But the much better scenario would be to, as Bitcoin grows, we have, as an industry, collectively pushed the narrative of economic freedom, of monetary freedom,
And more importantly, time preference, I think.
in time preference. And this, the dream, the unicorn dream would be that with the rise of Bitcoin, we have effectively convinced people to reduce consumption, save, have lower time preference, and value economic and monetary freedom. And if we've gotten people in the United States to care about that, then hopefully that will manifest itself in our laws and regulations. But it's not easy, and it's going to be a lot of work. And people like you and other content producers, and it's on you, it's on me as a company. It's on all of us to push this stuff and bring the world that we want to see into existence.
Well, that's the beauty of it, right? Like, if Absolutely. Not me, then who? If not you, then who?
Exactly. I mean,
it's all about effort, skin in the game.
Yeah.
Like, we can make this happen. It's just having enough people step up to make it happen. It does take work. It doesn't just happen. It takes action. Action is needed.
Absolutely. And the thing that I would tell people, and I think this is something that both of you and I have internalized, was if you've ever sat around and complained about something and never done anything about it, what are you doing? Right? Like, okay, good for you. You're a complainer. Now do something about it. And so that's the conclusion here.
Follow through, right?
Follow through. Anyone could complain.
And I'm not here to say that, like, I'm not solving the world's problems either. I'm putting my best effort forward to.
Yeah. At least you're doing something.
To
bring awareness,
Yeah.
you know? That's...
And I mean, what you're doing with River is like way more leverageable, right? Like you're creating the on-ramp, right? Like,
hopefully, right? You know, I mean, right now we're still small. We're still a small company. I think where the rubber meets the road is going to be like, if we can be this big company that I really hope we can be, and it's by no means guaranteed, right? I mean, we're a small startup and we have a long ways to go. But if we do, you know, reach that goal, what kind of company are we going to be? Like, what values are we going to embody? And, you know, if I'm still around, which I hope I am, then it's going to be, you know, pushing this narrative of economic freedom and trying to, you know, have a pair of balls, frankly. But it's tough when you're small, man. It is really tough because if you want to come out swinging when you don't have any clout, you're not going to get anywhere because they're gatekeepers, and the gatekeepers aren't going to let you through the gate. You know, you need a bank account, right? You need to, like I said, you need to sit down with the regulators and have the conversation, and that's okay, right? It's okay to play ball when you're young, and even when you're older. But when you're bigger, it's not okay to try to push the system in your favor to block out everyone else, right? It's not okay to not try to improve things for the better. And I think that's really kind of what I want to embody in my company is, as if we're successful, you know, our goal is to try to improve things for the better. And I hope we can do that. Maybe that's naive, but
I don't think so. I think the pie within Bitcoin is big enough that there can be many, many, many successful people building on it, right?
I look up to Square, for example. I mean, yeah, we're also selling, you know, we're a Bitcoin on-ramp, they're a Bitcoin on-ramp. I think, though, largely, I think that there's room definitely for both of us to succeed. And we also just offer, you know, somewhat different products, right? There's room for Fidelity. There's room for Charles Schwab, right? In the stock market game, right? There's room for Cash App and I see Cash as this, like, and Square in general, and Jack Dorsey as just these, like, shining examples of people who are really putting their money where their mouth is. I look up to those guys tremendously.
Again, disclaimer, sponsor, whatever. But
they're not a sponsor of me. I can say it.
Yeah, but no, like, honestly, like, and Jack gets shit on a lot, but I think he's a fucking very, very rare, principled founder in today's day and age.
I agree.
And I think he's more critical of himself than a lot of other founders are.
Yeah. And I think
really contemplates the impact he has in the world.
I totally agree. And I think it's not important. I mean, I'm not someone who turns people into heroes. I think people are human, but at the end of the day, like, Jack's someone I just really look up to. I think he keeps a low personal profile, so he doesn't really necessarily get a fair shake, I think, in the media. It's very easy to criticize any social media CEO these days.
Yeah, and, like, to think that he has full control over Twitter in particular.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think he had left Twitter for years. A lot of the people there are not anyone he's hired.
And what he did 2 weeks ago, announcing that open source team, you can tell he's like,
yeah.
And dude, when I
think he's on our side.
I've said this on this
I think
podcast
Jack's on our
before.
side.
Like, when I spoke with him earlier this year, like, that's one thing. That's why I like to speak to people in person, because you get to look them in the eyes. And
yeah,
able to look that motherfucker in the eyes, and I think he's earnest, and, like, he's for the cause, like, of the digital. Again, like, we need leaders like that in the digital age. We are, again, at a very critical juncture. We can go one of two directions.
Yep.
Complete dystopia, surveillance state, or the hard way, like open systems, cryptography, open source software. And the battle is being fought right now. We're in the midst of a war.
Yeah.
The war for the future is here. It's upon us, freaks. You're fighting, whether you realize it or not.
No, totally. And I hope we get more Jacks, you know. he was able to convince this public company, Square, to create an entire, division to just not doing anything that generates profit. It just works in Bitcoin full time.
And again, the focus on Bitcoin particularly
Yeah.
is very telling, very prescient.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is Bitcoin brings that out in people, right? It brings out the chutzpah, the chutzpah. I'm probably saying that right. I don't know for sure, but it just feels like the right word.
Chutzpah.
Chutzpah. Yeah. And and the one thing that I think the men and the women who work on Bitcoin stuff, they have this fire, and that's what I hire for at River too. Is the guys and the girls at River, and it's just Bitcoin in general. Everyone's got this spark. They're switched on, and it's just a sign like that we're on the right path.
What is that spark you look for?
I don't know how to describe it. It's just you just kind of feel it when you meet someone and it's in their eyes. They're just switched on. They're not. We kind of joke about. It's kind of a meme that we joke about. It's like kind of the fluoride stare. We kind of joke where it's like
I haven't heard the fluoride stare.
Yeah, it's like the fluoride stare. It's like they're drinking. It's kind of the meme. It's like they're drinking too much fluoride in the water.
Your eyes are crystallized.
Yeah. It's like you try. They're talking about football, and you bring up the Pentagon losing $1 trillion, and all you get back is the fluoride stare.
What?
What? Bro, like I don't know, man. I'm not really into politics.
Yeah,
but what about the Cowboys? But it's like they don't have the fluoride stare, right? It's like they just have an energy, and they're just present, and they care about something that is important. And you just feel it. You kind of know it when you see it, and that's what I look for, and that's what I love about Bitcoin is pretty much everyone's like that. You can't say that about a lot of other industries. I've worked at big companies. I've worked at small companies. There's a lot of people at big companies making a lot of money.
They don't do shit.
And they don't have a fire. They don't care about life, really. I mean, they care. Sorry, I don't want to say they don't care about life. That's not accurate. They care about their life, but they don't care about anything, that really gets them excited. They don't a lot of these people who make a lot of money.
Working for something bigger for themselves.
Yeah. It's like,
bigger than themselves.
I don't want to pick on like companies, but like, let's say you're working on some, you're working at Facebook and you're working on optimizing some like part of the Facebook groups app, right? It's like, after a year or two, you get over the shock of earning a great paycheck. You're out of college, you've been there a few years, you get used to the creature comforts of it all. You lose there's nothing else to keep you excited, right? The luster of Silicon Valley is worn off. The luster of the paycheck is worn off. The luster of the perks have worn off. And you're stuck realizing that you're waking up every day just like optimizing this like app that you don't really care about.
No.
With Bitcoin, I've never lost my excitement. After like 6 or 7 years, I wake up every day excited to work on Bitcoin. And so does everyone else who works on it. And like I've never seen anything else like that before.
What is it?
I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's like a drug almost, but people I know, you've probably experienced this too, but I don't want to say people are jealous, but it's like people who don't really care about Bitcoin are they see that in you that you do. And they're like, I wish I could find that in my life. I wish I could find something I cared about that much in my life outside of my friends. Of course, outside of your friends and your family. Everyone cares about their friends and their family more than they care about, anything else. But people wish they could have found something professionally that they cared that much about.
No, I totally feel that. And there's I don't want to say lost generations of people living in the cube.
Yeah.
Doing stuff they do not want to do.
No.
Stuff they do not like. Stuff that does not fulfill the human need for growth and wonder of what could be. Like, it's people working for other people, right? Like,
Absolutely. The periods of my life where I've earned the most money, had the biggest paychecks, I've actually been the least happiest. The happiest I've ever been has been when I moved to San Francisco and I slept on a yoga mat for 2 months trying to learn programming and focusing on trying to get a job in Bitcoin. And now when I don't take much of a paycheck and helping build this company with a ton of other very talented folks. And it's just like do or die. It's just like I'm just working. And it's just like it's the hustle. And I'm working on Bitcoin. And I've never been those are the 2 times in my life where I've been the happiest.
Yeah, no, and again, I don't want to rub and tug each other here, but like I feel like the same way too. Like, I started Marty's Band out of necessity. I've told this story before too. Like, I was unemployed for 2 years almost. I was unemployed for like 19 months. As much as I wanted to be a product manager, as confident as I was in my abilities to fulfill that role, I'd never done jack shit in that role. I never built a product. I never done any of that. And that's where Marty's Band started. I was like, all right, I need to build something. I need to prove that I can talk about a product, let alone manage a team that can build one. And I'd been reading and learning about Bitcoin for so long. I was like, all right, I'll start writing about this, and just naturally it's turned into this. Now fucking like 10,000 of you freaks download this podcast every week, and this is what I do now. It just happened naturally.
That's awesome, man.
No, but it's like,
it's when you found that fire,
right? But it's like you don't know you need it till you have it.
Yeah.
Like, I was literally forced into this.
You didn't know what you
like. I went to dozens of interviews, turned down. And when I started writing about something that I knew about, that's when I started not getting turned down, which is crazy. But like, to think that you can just, and that's like talking about our generation. Like, I fell into that trap. I was like, oh, I'm smart. I went to the schools to hit the credentials. It's just going to happen for me.
You're always just told, just follow the rules and you'll be content and you'll be comfortable.
Yeah.
And then
it doesn't work out that way.
And then I mean, for a lot of people it does. And they get a paycheck and then they're still stuck in that, like, what else is out there, right? I know people who, were guaranteed to have millions of dollars, by the time they're 30 years old, and they're not happy. They're like, is this it? And they realize, like, there's this other stuff out there they could really care about. And I'm like, shit, that's life. And that's what it's about.
Well, and freaks, think about it, because life comes with heavy opportunity costs.
Yeah.
You can waste a lot of time doing shit you do not like. And I've seen a lot of people waste a lot of time doing shit they do not like, and they regret it.
Yeah, absolutely. But everyone needs to make that decision for themselves. There's something to be said for putting in some time, building the skills at a big company, seeing how big companies run. That's very valuable.
Completely agree.
I think the trick is to know when to get off that hamster wheel.
Exactly. When to know when enough is enough. Yeah. Alex, you got to get going. It's been an incredible 3.5 hours almost.
It's been great, man. It's been an honor.
Yeah, well, please. Honor. It's been an honor having you here. You're building products that are making Bitcoin easier to access for the everyday layman. And again, going back to DCA products, like the set it and forget it nature of dollar cost averaging.
Yep.
Like, that's what the next time we speak, hopefully probably midway through next year, I want to hear stats about like people that like sign up for your service and just like forget that they even signed up and just like buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'll be sure to let you know. I mean, we've already surpassed our goal of, people who have set up recurring orders, and I hope that trend continues. So yeah, I hope also next year I can see you again, and we're in as many states as possible. But yeah, river.com.
What are the parting notes you want to leave the freaks out here?
I think that the conclusion we've come to in this podcast is, if you're sitting around and you want something to be different, ask yourself, what have you done to make that happen? And if you need help with that, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Marty. and make that happen. We're both on Twitter. We both have websites. We're both pretty easy to get in touch with. And if you want to make something happen for the better of Bitcoin, we're here to help you with that and help you get started if you don't know where to start.
Yeah. You actually locked down a great Twitter name, @Leishman.
@Leishman. Yeah, luckily my name isn't too common. Unfortunately, there's a very famous golfer with my last name, and I get his tweets sometimes. So
It's good to mix up with a golfer.
yeah. I can't golf.
Neither can I. Alex, thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you for building the products that you do. And thank you for joining us today. We got really drunk.
Yeah.
We've done all the beers.
Some good whiskey.
Some good whiskey.
What is that? Buffalo.
Some Buffalo Trace.
I normally don't drink much whiskey, but this was actually good.
Yeah.
This was good stuff.
Shout out to Mama Bent. She hooked this up for Christmas.
Wow. Awesome.
All right. Peace and love, freaks.
Peace and love. Merry Christmas.